This is Rydo, and we're back to Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel and video game news. Today is Wednesday, July 26th. We got a version update here. Still having to download things before launching, but seemingly this is the last time, for at least the Steam version, that'll be the case. From this new update onward, the game will automatically update upon launch for Steam users. Thanks for your patience for automatic updates. It is logical when playing on a phone that you would maybe want to tell the players, wait till you're connected to a Wi-Fi to download hundreds of megabytes or gigabytes of data on the cell phone. It's not logical on a PC. It just isn't. Like there's a general assumption, even if you were playing on a laptop, that you would be connected to a Wi-Fi or a LAN hardwired Ethernet connection 100% of the time. And even if you weren't, by the way Steam works, Steam only downloads when connected to an internet source that is almost certainly not metered. And I think you can pretty much label connections if you were connecting like a cell phone or a cellular modem to a laptop or a computer. You can label those as metered and tell Steam not to use those connections. I would suspect maybe that's not really true. I'm not sure. But yeah, PCs are different than cell phones, and the apps should be somewhat similar, but there should be some diversion there. And there already had been quite a bit of diversion there as far as just how the interface squeezes onto a cell phone versus how the interface squeezes onto a desktop. Let's see. So over yesterday I managed to get a couple more episodes of Shadow of the Tomb Raider, doing what I can only assume is like DLC content that, or deluxe edition content that was added later. I'm assuming the deluxe edition added content that was later, because I'm assuming what the case was in Shadow of the Tomb Raider is that there was a fairly bare bones, boring original version of this game, and then they were trying to push you into the now completely defunct and missing Square Enix multiplayer aspect, and then the deluxe content was an attempt to keep people playing Shadow of the Tomb Raider, which is really just always going to be a single player experience, but the deluxe edition may keep people playing the single player experience more, which might keep people playing the multiplayer experience more. And I assume that the multiplayer experience had some kind of microtransactions nonsense. But Lara Croft in a multiplayer game just does not make sense. And that's coming from somebody who really feels like Lara Croft should just be the mascot of PlayStation or Xbox. Like, it would have made a decent amount of sense had Lara Croft been acquired by Microsoft or Sony, that they would have just made her the Mario equivalent. She was definitely heavily used in advertisement and promotion of her own game and consoles back in when she was very big, around Tomb Raider 1, 2, and 3. So that would have been a good time to say, hey, we just want to own the intellectual property rights on her, and then Microsoft or Sony, probably Sony at the time, frankly, would have potentially made a bunch of spin-off games. It definitely would make sense for there to be some just walking simulator, escape the room games, archaeology, kind of almost educational games for Lara Croft, because that is a part of what Shadow of the Tomb Raider in this most recent Tomb Raider reboot is that it is wasting a lot of your time picking up items and getting archaeological backstory that way. But then there is also room for her to be in action games and shooter games, and her being a character in even something like an RPG kind of would make sense all of a sudden. And you see that with like Lara Croft Go and Lara Croft Staff of Destiny, Staff of Kings, whatever it is called, Temple of Osiris. So Crystal Dynamics at some point was thinking that ways that they could make some side games and use their Hitman character and their Lara Croft character as another as hero mascot characters to sell different types of games. And I would definitely have put her in a racing game, and I would definitely would have put her in a Mario Party game. I definitely would have put her in a tennis game. That would make a lot of sense too. Like Lara Croft playing tennis as a rich British lady. Totally makes sense that she would be in a tennis game. Now, in a lot of those games, you need a cast of characters from the Tomb Raider series or from some other series to match with it. And you probably don't want to go crazy and have like Sonic in a tennis game playing doubles with Lara Croft, but that might work fairly well. And honestly, if I was running a video game company right now, I would probably try to make a Lara Croft ripoff that had her more as a both CEO and an internet celebrity. And so just have her be popular, have her be beautiful, have that be part of her personality in her main storyline, is that she constantly has to go on these photo shoots and junkets, and she's using her beauty and sexuality to make sales and make deals and fund her archaeological adventures. The archaeology part of Indiana Jones actually is probably the most boring part, and the struggle of it. Particularly, you can tell now when you think about how the Dial of Destiny as an idea is basically just totally made up and not based on any real mythos. And the stones in Temple of Doom are pretty much just made up as a concept. And the Crystal Skull is too out there, too ancient aliens-y, whereas everything before Crystal Skull had at least an air of, there is some truth to all religions and some actual magic to all religions. Which maybe you would spin off from that and have maybe some old gods type mentality that the dead religions are right, or the small cult religions have some magical power to them. I wouldn't want to make a rip-off Lara Croft character that was super into being spooky. There is definitely a DLC section that's supposed to be very spooky in Shadow of the Tomb Raider, and it fails to have as much impact as it should, in that in the rest of the game there are plenty of other little spooky, gory sections. You're very often crawling next to bloody walls, or like crawling through a cavern covered in corpses. So when they do it just one more time, that's not particularly special. Let's see. Let's go ahead and just bring about another one of these characters. So we can just bring this back, can't we? I imagine there isn't anything special here you're supposed to do. Let's just see how this works. With luck, this is a one-turn kill. With poor luck, he defeats me completely, and then I'm out of cards. In a lot of ways, you already, I guess, have Joanna Dark from Perfect Dark from Microsoft. And so I guess that highlights in a real-world example that whenever Microsoft got Perfect Dark from Rare and acquired Rare as a company, which was probably over a decade ago, Microsoft did nothing successful with that. So had they acquired Lara Croft 2 or 3 decades ago, it still would not have changed too much. Wow. We are just discarding 8 cards. Oh, one of everything, I guess. And in all fairness, even the Microsoft, I guess if I'm gonna have to move on from this conversation. I think I've had it too many times at this point, but Hellblade, not Hellblade, Senua's Sacrifice. Heavenly Sword. Shouldn't probably have activated that, but whatever. Heavenly Sword does exist, and there, in that character, you could have had more of a female-led mascot instead of Nathan Drake, which Nathan Drake also, for Sony, only barely used as a mascot type character. Instead, Sony kind of rigidly refused to have a mascot. But yeah, you could have taken that Heavenly Sword character and you could have had her play a bigger role. Slight problem with that. that sucks. Yeah, but they kind of also killed off that character in the first Heavenly Sword game. You could have had a sequel, certainly, but she was perhaps too overpowered and not down to earth enough as a main protagonist character. I'm gonna throw out just a personal opinion here. I know everybody hates Elon Musk, and I know very much that it seems like there's good reasons to hate Elon Musk, and he does seem like he is A, kind of an idiot, and B, a really big idiot, I guess. But yeah, if you put somebody else in charge of Twitter, and yet he's still somehow the figurehead in making all the decisions, as it seems like it's the case, by changing the Twitter's parent company to X Corp, which he had already done, and now changing Twitter to X, then he's really not empowering the actual president and CEO in charge of Twitter. And, like, that's just bad leadership in general. And I really would have hoped that he could have surprised us all and, like, done something with Twitter that would have been amazing and really improved the problems that existed with Twitter far before he was ever involved. But he hasn't done that. But I, in all fairness, have to say, changing the name from Twitter to X isn't really that impactful for people to really poop on him. And it really has just been gotten to the point where people, a percentage of people are getting on the bandwagon of pooping on every decision he makes. X, as an idea, is perhaps a little too short by one letter, but it wouldn't have been crazy to change like Twitter's tag to @T, so you don't have to type in Twitter, or even just eliminate like the vowels in it. So instead of it TWITTER, maybe it was TWTR as a handle, because that would save people typing and it would be more efficient. You also, certainly if you just turned it to TWTR, then that might be whatever Twitter's potential stock ticker would be, which you could certainly see using your stock ticker as a short code. And it would be a middle of the ground change instead of a drastic change to X. X is a little short, and in general I think social media systems are probably better off if they don't allow any handles that are less than 4. Like, it's just too easy to accidentally tweet somebody. Otherwise, if you have an @T, @X, @A, for instance, yeah, it'd be very easy to accidentally type like 2, because that's the same key on the keyboard, I believe. Yeah. I don't know if numbers can even be handles on Twitter. But notice that's all I'm really talking about, because that's all it really changes is the handle part. But yeah, it's a dumb, rash thought that clearly he didn't think of, because Microsoft has trademarks and registered marks and copyrights around X in categories that almost certainly would overlap with things Twitter either does now or would want to do in the future. And it's not just Microsoft that has it. There are, I think, at least 2 other companies that I'm not even going to bother to try to remember that also have trademarks and registers around X. And X is just such a simplistic thing that it really shouldn't be trademarked or copied in that way anyways. And if I had any faith in Elon Musk. I'd almost wonder if this is some kind of 5D chess to invalidate the use of X in general. The Xbox still clearly would belong as a trademark and copyright to Microsoft, but them generally owning an X is kind of ridiculous. And it does certainly highlight, when you start to think about copyrights and trademarks, just the finite nature of language and how a copyright trademark system really fails as economies grow and more businesses are created. It fails the new people and fails to give equal protection to new companies because you have a bunch of stagnant old companies sitting on trademarks. But I don't know what the better system would be around it. But yeah, that's not video game related at all. So let's actually talk about video game news and move further and quicker into this. Hades started airing on my channel. It's going to be a short run because I only got like 4 or 5 episodes into it and then couldn't tolerate the amount of resetting that the game has when you fall to your death. It looks to me like an interesting game because you have this robot with big butt cheeks and a leotard, but the actual gameplay and programming around it is pretty bad. And I rage quit Hades, basically saying don't buy games for lewd reasons. Make sure they actually have good quality gameplay on it and polished experience. But I have noticed that the big butt cheeks have gotten me a few more views. Although I am very much just wallowing between, oh, this video has no views, and this video that with the big butt cheeks is getting 5 views. Oh, there's like a cat inside the crystal. So, in general, my channel's not getting as many views as I think it should be getting. And notably, YouTube's newest scheme, as people are starting to talk about it, is if you're in this like YouTube partner program, they have a new tab that says, we recommend you give us $200 to promote this video more. And of the 2 people that I've seen talk about it, they've said it seems to them like the videos are not getting really promoted anymore, and even if they were getting promoted more, they wouldn't get enough views to make back the $200. If anything, I guess this is YouTube just getting into the business of having you buy fake views. Or there is a possibility, I suppose, that there's some non-profit out there that just has to blow an advertisement budget and they don't care what it really does, so they are totally willing to waste $200 on the video. I could also see a slight thought around content creators that are making 1 video every month or 2, just taking that extra opportunity to say, hey, I have really successful videos. I get $400 or $500 from every video I get. Let me go ahead and put $200 back into that, not perhaps in hopes of actually getting another $200 worth of ad revenue, but perhaps in hopes of just reaching a bigger audience. Like if you're a charity and you just don't care about making ad revenue, if you're just trying to get your message out there, I could see promoting your videos there in that way. But for most content creators who who are living with the lie of YouTube being a potential career path. It really is just a scam. You would probably be better off buying fake views and just risking your channel getting deleted if getting caught. Or, arguably, you'd be even better off if you could... Wow, that makes a big sound. Buying fake views for channels that are competing against you to try and get their channels taken down. But that would probably be fairly expensive and wouldn't work, I imagine, too well. Let's see if this does anything. As far as video game news though, CD Projekt Red plans to lay off around 100 staff, roughly 9% of their team. There's no easy way to say this, but we are overstaffed. Which, if they are overstaffed, I think in that there is a confession, if you're to believe that they are not planning on having as much development as they once did. Which is to say, I doubt there is a full AAA CD cyberpunk style game being developed on top and in parallel to the Witcher 4 or whatever Witcher remake game that they're working on. Inherently, this is just more evidence of the claims of very poor, abusive management at CD Projekt Red, and them just mismanaging things and running their business into the ground. Noticeably, nobody is being stopped from making a game like Witcher 3, and if anything, a lot of people did not learn the lessons of Witcher 3 and its success well enough. When you compare some of these side quests that were added, particularly the deluxe edition added side quest in Shadow of the Tomb Raider, you can kind of feel like how there is a bit of a Witcher 3 style influence there. And with that style of influence, they're making a very different game from what you really expect from Tomb Raider. And it's very broken up because effectively it makes in the hidden city, which is the biggest city by 2 or 3 times, the only important part of Shadow of the Tomb Raider, and then the other 2 or 3 cities are really afterthoughts, and they don't have that many quests, and the questing and doing side quests and talking to people, like, it really got crazy at one point because I'm doing this side quest where I'm investigating a murder in the hidden city. That's not Lara Croft. That's not what the Tomb Raider reboot series has been about. The Tomb Raider series has been about being a survivalist and hunting and jumping around through tombs, which none of that was done in the murder mystery side quest. And so it's just getting far too far afield of what Lara Croft as a archaeologist, researcher, whatever she calls herself, when she's pretending to be an authority in the hidden city because she's wearing a different outfit, and then investigating a murder because of it. At least in the Witcher games, that's what Witchers are, is that they take on odd jobs and they fight monsters and they fight humans, and they do it for money. So they're just general work for hire characters with only the main story in Witcher 3 really connecting to that bigger aspect of interesting. Can't flip the card. Let's see. Moving on, the EVO 2023 schedule has been confirmed, including a surprise-filled Arc System Works panel. Street Fighter 6 will headline the show. This is Video Games Chronicle. So, several different announcements here of games. Now, what's weird about this, though, is EVO is a fighting tournament. So it's interesting that it's now also getting announcements, but it's not a terrible thought, certainly, to have announcements around the fighting tournament instead of having fighting games in particular try to get press and attention during like Summer Games Fest elements. I also wanted to scroll through here and see the games that they're actually fighting in the fighting tournament. Noticeably, there is no Smash Brothers at EVO, and there is no what is the fighting game with the girls with the hands coming out of their heads called? What is that called? I want to say Squid Girls, but that's not it. Well, I can't think of the name, but there was a fairly recent controversy around them changing the art, basically censoring the art in your fairly standard haphazardly way of censoring some of the like panty shots or leg shots and covering up a little bit of skin but still not covering up all the skin in this 10-year-old fighting game. After people had owned it and been playing it for 10 years. And, you know, just obviously that game is not at EVO in the same way that a lot of fighting games are not at EVO, but yeah, it would be weird if it was. I think I'm just gonna have to end here. Or save time and just surrender. I'm still wrapping up Destiny Child as the end of service is coming along. Spending the last bits of all the resources I could possibly spend and trying to figure out if I'm spending it in the right place or the wrong place. In general, what I'm trying to do is, and this is just an example of these gacha games having 5 different currencies, I'm trying to use the premium crystals currency to either get costumes by running through what is the Rebirth Lab mini game as one of the many different ways you can engage with it, or by just summoning characters outright with the crystals and then turning the extra characters that are duplicates into a secondary currency called Onyx, and then using Onyx to awaken the characters is what it's called, and by awakening a character you unlock its secondary outfit. So yeah, there's an awakened secondary outfit that's usually not as interesting as the other costumes in the Rebirth Lab, but The costumes in Rebirth Lab are also way more expensive. The hope is to get as much costumes as possible for the characters, so whatever the memorial update shows you would let you see those costumes. Although there really isn't a 100% guarantee that the memorial update isn't just going to be this single player experience where you can still grind out and unlock things. So you might be in a much better position. That's the hope. I've also created in my own mind a extra hope that perhaps the people at Shift Up that worked on Destiny Child may decide to go away from Shift Up, which is now being controlled one way or another by Tencent, and just start a different company and start a different game, and you could join in on that instead of sticking to like Nikkei, which is Shift Up's newest game, which will almost certainly also get shut down in favor of a new game whenever they make one by Tencent. And if there ever needed evidence that Tencent isn't a 100% positive effect on companies, we now have a prime example of this. And honestly, I doubt this is the first time. I wouldn't be surprised if this is closer to the 10th or 12th time that Tencent has invested in smaller Korean or Japanese companies, Asian companies that Westerners just haven't really been paying a lot of attention to. See if this works. This is taking forever. Oh yeah, as I was recording Shadow of the Tomb Raider, it managed to straight up reboot my computer, which this is concerning now because we had that problem where the computer was rebooting when Harry Potter Magic Awakened happened. Now I've seen a full-on blue screen of death reboot happen with Shadow of the Tomb Raider, whereas I'd only been seeing crashes to the desktop before that point. So I'm wondering very much if this isn't some problem happening with my computer overall. Like, I think it might be time to go ahead and install the 2022 update, 2022 H2 update to Windows 10. Even though that really shouldn't change much. Maybe it will. And it might even be worth a while to update the BIOS firmware. But clearly, also I will say, it's 100% obvious that it is video card related at some point. When you're opening a door and loading in new textures and the game just crashes, that tells me it's the game accessing video textures and video RAM in some weird way. Gamatsu has an article here. Microsoft has integrated Venmo into Xbox's payment system. In the US, at least, Venmo is currently an Xbox exclusive payment option. I don't really know if Xbox needed another payment option, but I guess it's fine to give people options. Although you get the most options in capitalism as here's your options to pay us money. You don't get options in any other way. Venmo is owned by PayPal, and PayPal definitely has a lot of horror stories around it. Like, I guess maybe the thing here is, as somebody who hasn't engaged with buying things, might be that they just don't have any of the other any other payment methods. Seems fairly weird that there isn't a direct connection to banks and Visa and American Express and just the credit card companies in general. For the most part, paying for digital games and subscription service have been done by buying a card through a physical retailer or linking the account to PayPal. With how Venmo gets used in the States to pay for anything from movie tickets to haircuts and social events, it makes sense to bring it to game storefronts. For consumers and developers alike, being able to split payments would be especially invaluable for either brand new games or renewing a subscription. Let's see if we can pull off anything here. Doesn't seem like we will be able to. I want some variety, certainly, in this Yu-Gi-Oh! Monster Festival. I'd like to play the other decks, but playing the other decks is not gonna help. So yeah, I guess I'm just unaware, blissfully unaware, that you can't actually just put in a credit card and use a credit card transaction. It is a little surprising, I would say, that there isn't an NFC reader. That those at this point would be very cheap to put on a console, where you could just tap a contactless credit card and do those kind of payments things. But even for the Nintendo Switch, which does have an NFC reader built into it, they've never engaged with that idea of contactless payments. It's almost certainly too much bad press for what little it would be worth, and it empowers kids to spend money they shouldn't be spending too much. I could see, though, instead of the story we saw in Monday's stream, where the ESA suggested face scanning app age verification, which really would only work for things that have cameras. So that's not the Xbox, that's not the Switch, and that's not the PlayStation. That's only cell phones. You could potentially have age verification with NFC type credit cards, and you could say, hey, as the adult primary card holder here, tap this contact information to our NFC, and that way we're going to get your age and your name, and anytime you want to log in you're going to tap either your credit card or you're going to tap a secondary card that we're going to give you. And then every console would come with, say, 5 or 6 ID cards, and the ID cards would be the thing to log in with. At that point, though, the NFC reader would probably be better off in your controller than in the box. And then there would be an NFC reader in every controller, which still probably wouldn't add but a few cents to the design. And then all of a sudden, if kids were identified and logging into their profiles with kid logins that weren't actually tied to a credit card information, you probably would get a decent amount of protection there. And then, of course, the game companies would lose sales from all the kids buying things without their parents' permission. Yeah, let's just try this. Double Fine is at an anniversary. Let's see. Today. Let's see where it was. 23 anniversary, so it's been 23 years since Double Fine was formed after the fall and split up of LucasArts, with some, if not the largest group of people from LucasArts going to Double Fine. But in that 23 years, they've had a very rough experience, certainly. Like, notably, they're not going to mention things like Brutal Legend, which is probably their most ambitious thing. They're just going to instead mention Psychonauts 1, Psychonauts 2, which is their most successful Double Fine titles. But then, like, Costume Quest 1 and 2, while interesting experiments have just been played out and you can't really highlight them too much. And then Broken Age was a Kickstarter nightmare idea, and not much came from that. And I don't know if I can really even name anything else that they've done in 23 years. Like 5 games in 23 years. And that's a very long cycle for a company that's making niche games that were never going to really appeal to the mass populace, and making smaller scale games that at best you would say are AA games, not by any means AAA games. I don't know what the trick here is, so let's just do that. And here we can see the guy in charge, Tim. What's his last name? Can I remember? I don't think I can. And you can see he's in what looks like a college dorm with Day of the Tentacle posters all up on here. This might just have been an old office for him, which, if anything, this just highlights that he over decorates all his offices or dorm rooms far too much. He has definitely aged in the time since that picture has been taken, but in general he kind of looks the same too. It's not a huge diversion there. But yeah, if you're going to even promote your anniversary, it feels like you should be able to promote it faster. Here's what he looks like now, like gray in his beard, more drawn out face, curlier hair, or better haircut. Perhaps he's lost some weight, skinnier face. But yeah, 23 years, so we'll do that. Has he really mentally matured in 23 years? I don't know him personally to really say, but I would say he doesn't seem like he really has. That it doesn't really matter about Tim, anyways, the guy in charge. He leads the company, but the company itself is the thing to focus on. And yeah, you can even see they're the creators of Psychonauts, Brutal Legend, Broken Age, and Rad. And so I had totally forgotten about Rad, which I don't even know what that is. Notably here, 2 Psychonauts game, 1 Brutal Legend game, 1 Broken Age game, 1 Rad game, I'm sure. You would hope, in as much as I would say Tencent sucks, Microsoft also kind of sucks as an acquisition company. They have sucked at this point because they really have not pushed Double Fine to make more games or remake anything. If I was in charge of Xbox, as soon as I acquired Double Fine, I would have said, hey, do we have any spare teams? If we have a spare team, let's have them remake Psychonauts 1 and remaster that so we can put it out. I think maybe there was a Psychonauts 1 remaster that just happened. What in the world just happened? I think all of Firefox just crashed. What in the world is going on? What in the heck is going on now? I can't blame that one on Shadow of the Tomb Raider. Definitely can't blame that on Shadow of the Tomb Raider. Anyways, it seems like it's mostly working. Yeah. If I was in charge of Microsoft, I would have said remake Psychonauts 1. Psychonauts 2 would have been put into development. That did happen. But then I also would have said, let's remake Brutal Legend and let's make some spin-offs of Brutal Legend in a way that we could continue that story or do something like that story without the real-time strategy element. Like, in general, I'd say remaster the first game so that you can skip the real-time strategy boss battle fights, and then the game becomes a lot more accessible and playable, and then spin off the real-time strategy boss battle fights to a separate thing and make a sequel to that if they really loved that concept, which it seemed like Double Fine really did love that concept, but nobody outside of Double Fine really seemed to care. But yeah. I would have definitely said Double Fine should be making some kind of point-and-click adventure game always, instead of just Broken Age. Like, Broken Age would have been remembered a lot better if it was just the first of 2 or 3 games. And see, they're not even mentioning Costume Quest here, which maybe just means Double Fine published them and didn't actually create Costume Quest. But yeah, as being owned by Microsoft, there's just not a lot of support here. Noticeably, they're not mentioning in Twitter Headlander or Massive Chalice or stacking. They've never even known about Middle Manager of Justice. They made The Cave, and clearly The Cave should have had a sequel, and stacking should have had a sequel. Some of these games, particularly as Microsoft could have funded these things just to be games to release on Xbox Gold, just didn't happen. And in a lot of ways, I imagine it's Double Fine in part saying, hey, if anybody's going to make a sequel to The Cave, it's going to be us, but we don't have time or skill to do it. And that's where Microsoft should have stepped in and said, well, too bad, then we're going to have somebody else make the cave, or have a support company make 90% of the cave and then have you work on 10% the visuals and the story writing part, but all the programming would be some other support company. Ironically, it might be the case that Double Fine is actually the support company for other companies. The remastered version of Full Throttle, Day of the Tentacle, Grim Fandango, but not the original versions, because these would have all been LucasArts games. Costume Quest is way down here. Never even heard of Space Base, Hack and Slash, Iron Brigade. Actually, there is quite a large list of games here that could be highlighted for the anniversary, and they just really are dropping the ball. And then Brutal Legend was way at the bottom here. A heavy metal style story should be done again. And then you run into problems like Happy Action Theater and Once Upon a Monster, which were Connect exclusive games, and I don't even know what this is. I can't even read it. But this is what Microsoft had them doing, is making Connect games that would interact for little kids from the makers of Brutal Legend, Sesame Street's Once Upon a Monster. It makes no sense at all, and it really highlights just the kind of lack of direction that Microsoft originally had. And almost certainly Double Fine is a example of a company that was acquired and supported by Microsoft because the people in charge were rubbing elbows and very friendly with the people in charge of Microsoft. And we are seeing more than likely the exact same thing with the Activision Blizzard merger, in that this is corporate protectionism, in the sense that one CEO is friendly with another CEO and they're keeping their business that otherwise would have failed afloat. And in power, or in funding. Compare Double Fine to something like Cyan, the makers of Myst. They have stayed independent and made nothing for many, many years, but when they came back to make new things, they have done it on the terms of making games they really did want to make and they were really inspired by it, and on the terms of having to still make a profit and be successful. Double Fine has been allowed to sit around and experiment for far too long, with an infinite money bag from Microsoft. Apparently, they started the company on Tim's birthday, so it's also his birthday. This is a weird story from Video Games Chronicle, just in the fact that we haven't really heard of anything from World of Warcraft in probably a year. Like, the legacy servers, I guess, are going fine, but nobody's really loving them and playing them enough to make a comment on that. And it's been a fairly long time since we've heard any announcement as far as updated new content for the main servers of World of Warcraft. At a certain point, I guess you have a decent cause here in which they're giving away pets, yellow and blue, nod to the Ukrainian flag, and then the proceeds are going to the to Blue Check, which you'd have to investigate Blue Check as a charity to make sure they're legitimate, particularly in a war-torn country. Aid is likely to be stolen or smuggled. But yeah, in the middle of this whole Activision Blizzard merger, it is kind of surprising we don't have more World of Warcraft commentary or even talk about it. Like, you would think what even now is very likely the biggest MMO on the planet, with perhaps the exception to being like Elder Scrolls Online. You would think that there would have been more pushback in the merger when they said, well, if Microsoft owns all the MMOs, they would have too much power. Not that Microsoft owns any other MMOs, really. I guess MMOs just don't matter, which in fairness, I really never felt like they did. Speaking of acquisitions, Capcom has acquired the support developer Sword Canes that helped make Hi-Fi Rush, which one of the things we probably as gamers need to get better at is figuring out the names of the real people that are working on games versus what the credits say, which are frankly full of lies, almost certainly. There's a lot of support developers out there that are doing a lot of the heavy lifting as far as how games are made, and they're not getting the appropriate credit. That's one of the things that I posted on I've made now 2 posts on the Destiny Child Global subreddit. I made a place and I said, hey, people, if you know the names of the actual people that worked on Destiny Child, let's put their credits here and put some updates here, and just have a forum post that people in the future could search and realize that this is these are the people and this is what they moved on to work on something else. In some cases, it's pretty obvious, like when there's a hired musician making the soundtrack for Destiny Child, like that was always a that would have always been like a contract work anyways, so that they were fairly independent. But the actual artists making the characters are much more interesting to follow than to follow just Tencent, the parent company, or Shift Up, the developer, because Shift Up at any point could drastically change as far as who's working there now versus who's working there in the past. Inherently, there's this logical fallacy that corporations are people, and I'm not going to get into too big of a rant here, but it's just not the case. If I went and started to work at Microsoft tomorrow, I did not help make Windows 3.1 or Windows 95 or DOS or anything like that. So should I be putting on my resume that I did make DOS and did make Windows 3.1 just because I'm working at Microsoft? No, that would be insane. That would be just straight up plagiarism and lying. But Microsoft claims they made DOS and they made Windows 3.1 and they made Windows 95. There's a very good possibility that maybe only a couple people that work at Microsoft now did work on DOS, did work on, and by DOS I mean MS-DOS, not just random DOS, or IBM DOS or something like that. Yeah. So we need to be more truthful in credits as much as we can, so people can actually follow the people they actually care about, particularly when you're talking about like creative works. It is slightly believable, I'll meet you halfway, that Microsoft may have a long-running history of establishing ways to write code and rules to write code and just like a style guide and how a mentality on how things should work. And because of those style guides and mentality on how things work, that is created this consistency on how their code works. But when you're talking about an artist drawing a character or a musician making audio, as you often are in video games, because that's mostly what we're looking for. We're looking for writers writing the dialogue, writers writing the narrative, animators animating the people, animators animating the movement of the people if they're 3D models or moving, animators animating the backgrounds, and things like that. And then audio, background music, voice acting, things like that. We don't, as gamers, particularly care about the project lead and how he overworked or underworked his employees, or how he scheduled vacations, or how he fired people that weren't working out, or how he hired QA teams and then ignored what the QA team said. And inherently we kind of don't care about the QA testers, because the QA testers may be really good at finding bugs, but we would never know it because they have no power to actually fix the bugs. And it's pretty difficult to even follow programmers, because you just really can't tell who's programming what unless there's just one programmer that made the entire program, and then at that point I guess you have to attribute everything to that. Moving on to a completely different topic, American McGee, which at this point I don't think he should even probably be trying to go by American McGee, but I'm not sure what his real name is, put on his YouTube channel him and his half Chinese son walking around their plushy dreadful storage facility, shipping facility. So, like, nothing video game related at all. He's just promoting his wife's business, effectively selling the plushy dreadfuls and the swag. Which, at a certain point, I think he probably should have just had a fresh break there and not put that on his YouTube channel at all. Because immediately you're just getting comments of Alice Madness Returns, or no, Alice Asylum, the third game that he was trying to make in the American McGee Alice series, and that failed miserably and almost certainly had never had a chance of succeeding. Let's see. Video Games Chronicle says Netflix's new animated Castlevania series has received a release date. Castlevania Nocturne will hit the streaming service in September. If anything, I feel like this is a different style, and this feels like this is going to be a different Belmont. There is, however, going to be some weirdness. It's coming out September 28th. Interestingly, I would say Netflix has, for the most part, succeeded very well with their password crackdown and increase in price by eliminating the basic plan and the basic ad-free plan and replacing it with a more expensive basic with ads plan. This does seem like a different art style, but I don't know what the timeline really would be, because they kind of had done a pretty good job of wrapping up the Dracula storyline, and you kind of wouldn't want to undo that element and make what was a fairly good wrap up into something different. Wow, 4 days left. I have managed to win exactly one duel in festival since this quest has been added, so suffice it to say, I am not particularly chipper around the amount of progress that has been made today. It's or around this festival in general. On the good side of that, I can't do anything else until the month starts over, since we're already at platinum. I didn't even go into the shop and open any packs today, and we'll just save that. Yeah, I can't go and do this, so all there is to do is to really keep playing this, and if I got really lucky, 3 victories, I would get to this point, which is the minimum of what you would want to have happen. Not that I really care about a crystal mate character, but I really would like to get to this point, which we're nowhere close to get 300 more gems. And then more legacy packs are still helpful. They still got plenty of cards to go and plenty of stuff to do. But increasingly it's becoming at least more noticeable that some of these events are just straight up duds. They just do not work well as events. And at a certain point I'm glad that Yu-Gi-Oh! Is experimenting, but in their experiments they need to have some more successes, or they need to kind of slow down on the experiment and have events last a little bit longer so you can bang your head at them some more, or lower the requirements. Inherently, always having to win medals in almost every event and always getting medals only because you're winning is a bad system. They need to experiment with a different system where you're getting medals for just the amount of damage you do. If every month there was a regular festival and then there was a damage festival where every bit of damage you do gives you 1 medal, and you're just trying to go up the leaderboard and see what deck can do the most amount of damage against your opponent, which that would be a little risky to do it that way, because it would encourage players to really wreak havoc on their opponents and demoralize your opponents. But it's at least something different. Or you can have a time festival, play the game as fast as possible, or play the game based on time, and the more time you put into it, the more medals you get, just based on the total length of the game. Yeah, something like that. So try it, some other metric. GameDeveloper.com has an article here. Xbox hardware stumbles as Game Pass delivers a record Q4 engagement. Microsoft only saw a 1% increase in gaming revenue during the quarter, but the company CEO Satya Nadella claims that the future is bright for Xbox. In this last quarter that they're talking about for their fiscal year, which their Q4 being now is a little off from what you would expect as far as just a regular year Q4. There really hasn't been a lot of big games or successful games for Microsoft. So yeah, what in the last 3 months or 4 months or even 5 months has come out for Xbox that they'd be celebrating or talking about? Not much. Plus, times are tough and everything's getting more expensive, and we can just go down that route and point out other things. It'll be interesting to see if Sony gives similar reports, or if Sony somehow manages to do a lot better. I could see Sony doing better because they're going to have the strength of Spider-Man games and Last of Us 2 remake, Last of Us 1 remake games, things like that. Moving on, Capcom has boosted a consistently strong mid-2023 quarter. Big hits like Street Fighter 6 and Mega Man remasters have helped drive Capcom's extremely profitable spring and early summer. That is also perhaps overlooking Resident Evil 4 remake, which would have definitely had a big part of that. Let's see. throughout June and July, Street Fighter 6 sold 2 million units, Resident Evil 4 sold 5 million units, and Mega Man Battle Network 1.35 million units. So clearly Resident Evil 4 is the game to mention, and yet here we have GameDeveloper.com not mentioning it at all in their subheadline. Which that feels like there's potentially a bias there. What is the bias there? Anti-horror games, I guess. Both Street Fighter 6 and Mega Man games, all from Capcom, all Japanese games. Street Fighter 6, I guess, doesn't feel like a Japanese game, but Mega Man Battle Network feels way more like a Japanese game than even Resident Evil 4 Remake would. So I'd have to say the bias is in favor or probably against horror games, or just there's been too many Resident Evil 4 articles already, or whoever is writing the headlines, usually the editor on the website, is just weird and deciding something else. Here we have a Blood Rain cosplay, and I'm gonna, I guess, be sporadic and inconsistent on whether I cover cosplay or not. In this, it's an interesting thought. If you went to Comic-Con and you were cosplaying Blood Rain, a vampire lady, would you be allowed to have prop blood on your face, or would that be unacceptable, or dripping blood down your cleavage? Blood Rain is interesting in particular since they have not made a new Blood Rain game in a very long time. I think they may have announced that they were working on a new Blood Rain maybe a year or two, but then they've been completely radio silent since then. And Blood Rain is definitely a Lara Croft-like character who is perhaps best known. I don't think her real name is Blood Rain even. She's best known by her appearance and selling on sex than she is known for her actual game, which was just a first-person shooter with vampire elements. She's basically like Blade, is to my understanding. You have a black leather outfit, but in this you can't really see too much of the outfit as far as the actual costume cosplay. And then a bright red wig and perfect makeup, which in this case I think the perfect makeup probably is in line with the way Blood Rain would have been depicted. What's funny is this is hashtag both movie and video games. Is there actually a Blood Rain movie out there? I don't know. If there was, I missed it. There is, according to GameDeveloper.com, a report that a unannounced Immortal sequel was killed by Ubisoft amid larger franchise focus, which is to say absolutely nothing. Because if you can't drop the report part, then you're just reporting on rumor and speculation. And even if you are reporting on rumor and speculation, you should still drop the report part. If it's an unannounced game, that means very little it was probably done on it. It could have just been in the concept where one person said, hey, let's make a sequel to Immortals, and then it was canceled. The update here says that Ubisoft stated that its Quebec team, which developed Immortals Phoenix Writing, will have some teams and resources shifted around to work on other projects, which these two statements potentially are completely separate from each other. When I see this, I think, oh, this could be like a God of War / Kid Icarus merger. It would kind of have the visual of Kid Icarus that people are somewhat nostalgic for, people who probably never actually played the original Kid Icarus games, and then a God of War flying thing. Although once you get flying to your character, you have some big problems at that point. Anyways. But Immortals Phoenix Rising as a game did not go anywhere, was not well received, and so even if they did announce a sequel, people wouldn't be that interested in it. see. GameDeveloper.com also is consistently desperate for blog submissions. They have retweeted it. It seems like they're going to retweet it every couple of weeks to just remind people that their blog submissions are open. Which, yeah, I don't have anything else really to say around that. TubeBuddy here deserves to be like locked in the stocks and have tomatoes thrown at them for this retweet. This is how you do it. They retweet it, and so you have this person, Patty Galloway, who allegedly is a successful YouTuber. There's frankly a lot of people who claim to be super successful YouTubers, and they aren't, or they're successful YouTubers because their entire channel is about tricking people to watch their videos who want to also be successful YouTubers. And you see this in the real world far before YouTube was ever a thing, where you have these motivational speakers and these success managers and buy my book type people who only are successful because they've got enough other people to think they're successful, which at some levels maybe that is all success is in some industries. But this YouTuber is talking about he uploaded a video almost 2 years ago, and every single month it pays him between $500 and $1,000, which in fairness that is what most YouTubers would benefit from if that happened to most YouTubers. And that certainly was the idea of my YouTube channel in particular, is that I wanted to make a lot of content while playing games that I was enjoying, and I hope I can still find ways to enjoy playing video games even now, although it sometimes feels harder after 10 plus years. But yeah, the idea of having passive income and getting $500 to $1,000 just in general from all my videos would be very helpful on a monthly basis if you could get some kind of level of consistency there. But the numbers, when you start to see it, and the fact that this person got in early, 2 years earlier at least, really highlights the reality that this is just not going to happen for 99.9% of YouTube content creators. The 3 steps to make an evergreen video: choose a timeless topic, and then it goes on, and you can show more. Choose a timeless topic, avoid context-dependent material, hit a future-proof quality standard, which future-proof quality standard's pretty much impossible to do, and talking about something very generically is basically making fluff content that nobody cares about, and timeless topics tend to be impossible to talk about too. But look at the numbers here. This person has their analytics up here for what looks like the last 2 years, the lifetime of it. But this information here is done usually in the last 30 days. So, is that accurate? No. This has to be lifetime. Yeah. So, in the lifetime of two years, this video has been seen by, I'm gonna assume, 5.1 million people views, which has given him 325.7 thousand watch hours, and overall, I'm not sure if that really means it's given him 60.4 subscribers, 60,000 plus subscribers, and an estimated revenue of $20,000. Roughly estimating here, rounding up. That being said, what is not being shown here is the average performance of his other videos, which are somewhere around 1 million views. And anybody that can get 1 million views on average for his videos is doing way better than most. So this is just the lucky breakout. This one happened. And yeah, I have a video on my channel that has performed considerably better than all the other videos on my channel. That doesn't tend to help that much. But yeah, this is a fantasy for all but the lucky few on YouTube. And I really have to just encourage content creators to not expect to make any money at all as a content creator, ever. YouTube should be your hobby at best. And even if you got really lucky and really successful very early on, putting your effort into it is probably not going to pay off in the long run. That being said, though, in the United States in particular, where jobs are still somewhat plentiful and pay still somewhat well, that would be the advice. If you're in India and the options are work at a call center for $1 a day or be a YouTuber and make $5 a day, then be a YouTuber by all means. But yeah. Flipping burgers at McDonald's in the United States will get you far more money and far more consistent income than being a YouTuber will. Which isn't to say you can't have a passion to do it, but the money is just not there. And if anything, it's getting worse, not better. Speaking of getting worse, I wanted to highlight this Lego soccer set in the way they've decided to promote this here. In that the complaint about this set that I had, while it does have some interesting side builds as far as cameras and a slightly different stadium and some extra accessories, it's not giving you a full court of a soccer field. Compared to the Lego foosball table, though, it looks like it's considerably fewer pieces, which is kind of helpful in the price range. Not that it would be particularly that cheap, but you're not getting a full team. I think it's 7 to 9 players are supposed to be on the field per team. And you're getting 4 players, identifiable female soccer players. This is about promoting female soccer players, and 1 goalie, and no other team at all. And now they're promoting this by saying, take this, let's just assume it's a $150 set that probably should be selling for about $80. They're saying, take this set and supplement it with an $800 tablet. Let's just assume that's the average price of a tablet, or a $700 cell phone, and watch video of actual football / soccer. It's ridiculous. Completely ridiculous. And fairly obviously they I would assume it would give you instructions around how to build these holders for your devices. But this is smack in the face the wrong direction for Lego. That one thing parents really love about Lego is that you're doing something physical and not just watching screens. If kids are now watching screens or being encouraged to watch screens instead of playing with the Lego and using their imagination, Lego is going to become considerably less popular amongst parents for that reason. Like, Lego, not even a few years ago, was selling itself on using your imagination. And this is incredibly uncreative as far as the makers of the set, and uncreative of Lego in general. Yeah. And all I really would have wanted for this set is just this field and a full team, or 2 full teams. Just, that's all I would have really wanted from this set. Even if it was 2 broken up sets. And so you got 1 team and half a field in one set that was the red team, and then you sold another set that was the blue team, and that was a different field. And they connected together, and that's how you played soccer in your imagination. But yeah, that's not video game related. There was this dust up about Ubisoft deleting inactive accounts. Apparently now, according to Video Games Chronicles, the publisher has clarified its stance after a support email led to some to believe libraries could be wiped. Ubisoft says it won't delete inactive accounts that have purchased games, which almost certainly every Ubisoft account that exists has a purchased game on it. I looked into my account and logged in just in case, and I have like 8 games, almost certainly all of them purchased through Steam. Maybe I got one for free some other way. There is something, I guess, maybe in the GDPR, where if an account is inactive, it has to be EU's GDPR law means companies can only store individual personal information for a certain length of time. And that they've said they've been removing inactive accounts for many years now. It takes a number of things into account before deleting the inactive account, and one of the things is whether they've previously purchased any PC games. I wouldn't be surprised if the GDPR says if you have an actual business relationship, you don't have to delete individual personal information. In practice, as of today, we have never deleted accounts that have been inactive for less than 4 years. They're leaving themselves open, certainly, to lower that number, but it seems like this was a bit of hysteria, and if anything, Ubisoft has just done a very poor job of messaging that information, because clearly that messaging should have already been written and ready to go, and as soon as the information blew up, they should have said, see this support post here explaining what accounts get deleted and when, and no, we're not out here trying to be evil and delete your accounts that you haven't played in like 30 days. Certainly 30 days versus 4 years is a big difference too. Like, if I haven't logged into Ubisoft or played any Ubisoft game in 4 years, I probably am never going back to playing a Ubisoft game at that point. This is an interesting story from Video Games Chronicle. Xbox is going to soon let players map keyboard keys to the controller buttons. The feature is now available for Alpha Insider members. Now, what's weird about this is I would have assumed this already could be done. Like, why wouldn't that have been an option the day you introduced keyboard and mouse input on Xbox? Like, so up until this point, a game would have had to have been manually programmed for like WASD to be up, down, left, right on either the left or right analog stick or D-pad or something. That just seems insane. What? If anything, I guess that just really highlights how little interest they have in actually supporting keyboard and mouse on consoles. And in all fairness, I just don't think there is that many people that really want to play keyboard and mouse on on the consoles anyways. You're just better off on a PC. I say this as Firefox is crashing and my computer is potentially breaking. You know, Firefox honestly could have crashed on its own for its own separate reason, but I really am stretching to find excuses. But Firefox has been consistently problematic with all its plugins. It's just never really crashed. It probably has crashed actually before. Alright, let's move on here. I started to upload some of the YouTube shorts to the channel, and then I remembered I can only upload 100 shorts at a time, so I've dropped the ball in making YouTube shorts and actually uploading them, and I really have dropped the ball in scheduling things. We're still doing the Steam Stealth Fest, and yeah, this game still requires co-op to play, 2 players. I'm really glad that didn't become a standard thing, because that could have been really annoying if all of a sudden there was a significant number of games that required co-op to happen, required a second player. Noticeably, there really aren't any YouTubers out there other than maybe Game Grumps that have a second player covering and playing the games with them. Let's go through the Video Games Chronicle articles quickly. We already talked about the Evo. We already talked about CD Projekt Red. We talked about Capcom acquiring Sword Canes, which apparently this is their logo. Let's see. Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart has been Steam Deck verified. It was claimed in 2020 that it wouldn't be possible to be played without the PlayStation's SSD. I also saw a YouTube video, I haven't watched it yet, where there's a mod out there to put in Hall Effect control sticks into the Steam Deck, which there already was a mod, I'm pretty sure, but it was very difficult to do it. I would be a little surprised if there isn't some version of a Steam Deck 2, and honestly they should just make annual versions and not call it Steam Deck 2. They should just call it Steam Deck 2024 parentheses. But I could see a more expensive version there that has Hall Effect control sticks by default. Internally, I would hope that a new version of the Steam Deck would have a better way to put bigger sticks of SSD, NVMe RAM in it, maybe better battery, bigger batteries, and maybe even a better cooling solution, perhaps with that new technology that's going around, where it's a solid state cooler instead of a fan cooler. But otherwise, I'm not really looking for a Steam Deck 2 to change or revolutionize itself much. You could potentially convince me I don't need the touchpads and put the analog sticks in a more natural place to where the Xbox analog sticks would be, but that's about it. Yeah, notably, there is a problem with the Steam Deck in that there isn't a place where you can go get your hands on one. It would be very nice if GameStops or Best Buys or just electronic stores and general Walmarts had Steam Decks that you could actually go and pick up and hold in your hands and make sure it has a comfortable grip. But yeah, so far Valve hasn't done that. We already talked about Ubisoft canceling an Immortals Phoenix Rising sequel. This, if anything, feels like this is a article by mainstream video game journalists who perhaps enjoyed Immortals Phoenix Rising way more than your average gamer did, where your average gamer didn't seem to care at all about it. I already talked about the pet pack. Bender, Fry, and Leela are now in Fortnite. Who is this character? This color swap of Fry. Is that his brother? Chansey is the name? Then you have Hypnotoad and a giant lobster claw cracker. Hulu has given Futurama a new season, and I watched their first episode, which really is a fine episode. It's not anything super unique other than it's an episode about being on Hulu and making references and making fun of Hulu as Hulu has just picked them up. If anything, it breaks the fourth wall perhaps too much, and definitely I would say keep an eye out to see if perhaps Futurama has nothing new to say in this season, which is very possibly the case. Like they've gone, this is like their 11th season, so they've made all the jokes that they can think of. They can't really go that further. And some of the people who worked on Futurama went on to like make Enchanted on Netflix, and Enchanted really didn't work as a concept, and they've gone on to do other side projects as Futurama was canceled and then comes back, and yeah, I think they're just kind of out of steam. And I'd say Rick and Morty potentially has got the same issue around it, in that it's likely to be somewhat out of steam in the next season or two. Although Rick and Morty also has a problem now that the voice actor was canceled in a cancel culture attempt, and then all the accusations were actually recanted and proven in a court to be inaccurate or wrong, and they still didn't hire back Justin Roiland. So he was doing the voice of all the Rick and Morty characters, basically. So if we do get any more Rick and Morty cartoons, voice acting is very likely going to sound different. It's an interesting crossover, and Fortnite really is willing to just do crossovers with basically anything, because I seriously doubt too many kids that are playing Fortnite really even know what Futurama is or would care about it. But maybe Fortnite is being played by older people these days. Moving on. EA says stay tuned for Skate console playtesting news. A year after the PC playtesting, EA assures console players their chance will come. So I guess they're still working on a Skate console version. Amazon lists 2K's unannounced Lego football game for a September release. Football being soccer. It definitely seems like Lego is going very heavily into the soccer thought this year, and hopefully that doesn't eventually just ruin Lego as a big flop, or as they get tied into some FIFA type scandal or something like that. I'd imagine outside of the United States, though, football is still very popular amongst kids, so it makes a lot of sense to have more football/soccer Lego sets, when there basically have been none up until this point. Microsoft is rolling out a new Xbox home screen to all users. If anything, I think this is the biggest problem with Microsoft in a nutshell. Whether it's Windows or whether it's the Xbox desktop, this mandatory forcing of change as far as the user interface is just unacceptable. And frankly, it's always been unacceptable. Even going from like Windows 3.1 to Windows 95, forcing people to that change was unacceptable to some people. And people were using Windows 3.1 for a long time after 95 came out. And that is the most extreme example of people really loving the interface of Windows 95. It only gets significantly worse as far as the reception between 95 and 98 and XP and ME and Windows 10 and Windows 11 changes being the most drastic ones. And I can almost excuse Windows 11 as just admitting complete defeat in saying that the Apple bar at the center launcher and the Linux bar at the center launchers, which is how a lot of Linux designs are, has just one. But then for this game console, you're getting something much closer to like a Netflix shelves concept with different widths. Let's see. Xbox Series X and S is finally getting an enhanced Terminator resistance and its DLC. PS5 owners got the upgraded new story content 2 years ago, which, wow, that's slow. I would heavily question if that's just Reef Entertainment being extremely slow and not some Sony exclusivity deal. I seriously doubt Sony's cares if a game's content is off of Xbox for 2 years when it's a Terminator game. Although I think Terminator Resistance in particular was actually fairly well received. But then you do run into the problem, if I was going to try and play Terminator Resistance or any Terminator game, that there's just way more bad Terminator out there, whether it's movies or video games, than there is good Terminator. So it's really a genre probably worth skipping. Sony has announced August PlayStation Plus Essential Games. I saw all these bright lights and I thought it was going to be Sony has announced integration into Apple HomeKit or something as far as smart devices. But nope, it's just a game. Yeah, the light bulb I guess made me think that too. It is a little surprising that there isn't a better like Apple HomeKit, Google Home type interface with consoles. Obviously you should be able to talk to your console and tell it to turn off lights or turn on lights when you start playing a game, and it also should be able to receive commands from other controllers. And with the Matter standard, I can see that being a new thing, eventually coming in the next 5 to 10 years. It's not the best way, but at some point in the future, I wouldn't be surprised if smart electric meters installed by your power company are also connected via Matter and Thread to your house, and they have special signals they can send to shut down devices like consoles and say, hey, we're about to have a blackout, shut down, gradually, gracefully shut down computers, consoles, lower the temperature on thermostats, things like that. Which they do have systems like that, but it's all proprietary systems and really only focused on thermostats at the moment. Even gracefully, like putting a refrigerator in a protect mode could be very helpful to gracefully shut it down. But I don't want to get into a rant about smart home devices. I will say my smart ceiling fan, for as much as it should just work, has just worked. So I've had no real problems with it. Now it really is just a matter of hoping that because it's a Chinese product, it doesn't short circuit or burn out in an unreasonable amount of time, 6 months, a year, something like that. And I would heavily recommend it. The price is not terrible. I got it on sale for $150. There are cheap ceiling fans that I saw at Home Depot on sale for like $50, but by the time you add another $50 remote kit to it, you're back up to $100, and then those ceiling fans are just as cheap. But yeah, just having a remote and potentially being able to program something in the future is very useful, particularly in the case of my kitchen. My kitchen is just like kind of connected to the dining room, which is connected to another room, so it's 3 rooms that barely are kind of all open floor plan connected. So it's one giant room. And so it makes a lot of sense that the ceiling fan in the dining room should synchronize with the ceiling fan in the other room. There's no ceiling fan in the kitchen, obviously. And that's where something like a smart ceiling fan makes a lot of sense, is that if all of a sudden you have rooms that are connected and you'd like one light switch to turn on all the lights in 3 different rooms, or if you would like the fans to turn on that way, that's all. That's where a smart fan could be very helpful. Back to video games though, and I'm gonna go too long if I'm not careful here. A video shows a Ratchet & Clank PC port struggling to run on a PlayStation 4 hard drive. The game is a knockout from the visual perspective, according to the team. Which, what is that really supposed to mean? Like, what are you supposed to take from that? That there's not been optimization? Like, a 10-year-old 5400 RPM laptop hard drive would struggle to play a almost brand new game. So what? Yeah. If anything, that just highlights people, it educates people to not play games on really old equipment, and laptops in particular. But I don't know what else you really take from that. Yes, Ratchet & Clank is trying out a new technology as far as streaming data directly from SSDs, and instead of using like Microsoft Direct Stream. And so it is a new experiment in a new technology to speed up the loading of level data, but then hampering it with an old hard drive is obviously going to cause it to have trouble. So, as an actual gamer, what are you supposed to take from this? Not potentially buy Ratchet & Clank PC port? That would be the wrong message. Be surprised and happy that it can play at all on such an old hard drive? I don't know. Like, I don't know what you're supposed to take from it. It seems like that's just really not helpful information. It's just fluff news, which we get a lot of that in the game industry. We'd already talked about the Castlevania series. Sea of Thieves Season 10 has been delayed to October. Its launch has slipped from August as Rare struggles to pull together its headline feature, what's the headline feature? The Monkey Island content? It's amazing that Sea of Thieves has 10 seasons, and I still would describe Sea of Thieves as a beta that's just been going on for way too long. And honestly, I really feel like the only people that are playing Sea of Thieves are people that work at Microsoft. And maybe this is the thing. Maybe we'll see Larry Herb, Major Nelson, aka Major Nelson. Maybe we'll see him actually retire and leave, and then immediately Sea of Thieves will be cancelled, and then developers working on that will work on other better games. Potentially, there might be so many people inside of Microsoft playing Sea of Thieves that if it got cancelled, you'd see productivity go up by a big amount. Also, that is speculation on my part, certainly. The pizza scented controller we had already talked about, with a scent diffuser on the back. Almost certainly that would get you sick in the long run. Just smelling pizza all the time. It'd either get you sick, nauseous, or get you hungry. I wonder if there is any kind of therapy out there where you'd put pizza flavored scent diffusers or food flavored scent diffusers around anorexic people who would just not eat. It probably wouldn't help much, frankly. Most of these stories I think are going to be old, like Borderlands Echo Vision Live. We don't know really anything about that. Call of Duty Modern Warfare Elite 3 artwork and game logo maybe have leaked. An interview here with Star Wars Outlaw developers discussing world building in a behind the scenes video. Disney Speedstorm Season 3 will add Minnie Mouse, Lilo, and Stitch content next week. Also saw, not in Disney Speedstorm, but in a DreamWorks racing game, Shrek is coming back after 10 years of not being no new content, including Shrek happening. We talked about remapping keyboard keys to the controller. Noticeably, I don't know if you could go the other way and map controller keys to a keyboard input. I don't know if that would really help you too much. Anyways, let's see. We talked about Ubisoft not deleting accounts in the way that it was originally described. There is a report that alleges Roblox casino sites are letting children gamble millions of dollars. Almost certainly true. The site lets players wager Robux currency in luck-based games, and you buy Robux currency, so it's just a conversion from one currency to another. Blizzard is tweaking Diablo 4's menu as players are accidentally activating premium battle passes. Some are accusing the studio of malicious design. It sounded to me like you could activate a battle pass and then activate it again. And I'm not sure if you really would get a secondary benefit of having 2 battle passes over. I don't really think that's the only problem, though, with Diablo 4. I think inherently you have this air of negativity around Diablo 4 because as a game, it's not blowing players out of the water. It's not a fun, great experience that would have people overlook all the microtransactions and all the resetting of characters and battle passes and season resets and just content that's perhaps grindier than it should be and just not that interesting narratively. What you would have wanted to have happen is Diablo 4 would have come out, and then by this point you would have had players talking about either the first boss or even the last boss in the narrative storyline elements. But I've heard nobody singing the praises of this story at all, which I assume just means it's nothing as a story. I've heard nobody sing this story the praise of the character designs and the skills and the effects. I've heard nobody sing the praises of the level designs and the enemies and just the way the gameplay works. There is perhaps an argument to improving how Diablo plays overall. It has been a mouse clicker game its entire lifetime, and perhaps now they should rethink the controls and turn it into more of a control console type game. Even though controller support exists, maybe it should be controllers first and not mouse and keyboard first. Arguably, maybe there should just be some spin-off Diablo games that are into completely different genres. Maybe there should just be a turn-based RPG Diablo game. Maybe there should be an action RPG Diablo game. If all of a sudden Diablo games were like Final Fantasy games, that might get a different audience. Maybe there should just be some spin-off Telltale style narrative stories told around Diablo. And one could hope that maybe they would do more with their IPs once Activision Blizzard is owned by Microsoft, but I wouldn't be surprised if they really don't do anything more and will have a Diablo 5 come out some years in the future that is poorly received as much as Diablo 4 seems to be poorly received. Here's that story I was talking about. Shrek is making his console comeback after 12 years in DreamWorks All-Star Kart Racing. The Swamp Dweller hasn't appeared in a console game since the Xbox 360 games. What's funny is that there's a Disney Speedworks kart racing, and there's a DreamWorks All-Star kart racing, so real name confusion there. I guess maybe Shrek has been in other animated things in the last 12 years. This does create a weird situation, certainly, as to do you want to play the DreamWorks Mario Kart ripoff or the Disney Mario Kart ripoff? I would say, at least looking at this, the DreamWorks kart racing game visually looks more appropriate compared to the Disney one, where the Disney one had all the Disney characters in racing outfits and generically looking realistic racing cars, where clearly Shrek is in his just usual outfit, and this is something Shrek would build in the swamp. So I definitely would lean, depending on the microtransactions and the monetization, towards DreamWorks All-Star Kart Racing. Doesn't have a link to anything yet. Nope. Still no real information. Armored Core 6 gameplay video shows 13 minutes of the game in action. I wish I had more time to watch these trailers, but I don't. This is a mech game, flying around in a mechanical suit, which, if you could do it well and you can control it well, a mech game should be an amazing concept. Every now and then there should be an amazing concept around a mech game, but so far controlling mechs has always been very clunky, because you're just controlling these flying units that have too many degrees of freedom and too many button presses potentially to have to press. If anything, the difficulty in flying a mech, as talked about in almost every mech anime, is too accurately connected to the difficulty of flying a mech in video games, when it really should be a lot easier. At a certain level, this is just basically Star Fox too, from the looks of it. You're flying around fighting a giant robot character. And a lot of times I think you'll be sliding around other mechs that are just about the same size. So after watching that trailer for a little bit, I'm a little bit more hyped on that, but probably still not particularly interested in playing the game until I hear really good reviews. And Armored Core 6 is highly likely to be one of those games that is reviewed very well, or just reviewed a lot in general in Japan, and not reviewed by Western reviewers at all. Moving on, Starfield animated shorts offer a look at 3 of the game's major cities: New Atlantis, Aquila City, and Neon Feature in the latest trailer. I guess the question to ask here, if you're going to compare this to Skyrim, is how many major cities were in Skyrim. I would say you have the central city that you always reach at the beginning of the game, in the middle of the map. Then there is a major city far to the left of the map, and then there is a major city far to the north of the map that you actually get to fairly late in the game. And then there is at least one central city far to the right of the map. So there's not perhaps that much of a city south of the map. Instead, there's just kind of a major mountain, but it's not really a city. So there's about 4 cities in Skyrim that I would say are the big cities. But then I would say there's got to be at least 5 or 6 other medium-sized or small cities in Skyrim too. So if it were a case that there really were only 3 big cities and barely anything else, like you'd have one city that's really big and feels big, and then you would have just a lot of outposts that are barely a room or two. Uh, that would be a problem. And if anything, that would probably be closer to what Fallout 3 would be, in that Fallout 3 has Megaton City and the Boat City and the tower, and it's all kind of on the right side of the map. And then pretty much while there are some other cities in Fallout 3, they are all very small. Of course, also the comparison between Skyrim and Fallout 3 is that you're walking from one city to another, whereas because you're flying, and assuming flying at a fairly fast speed, you'd expect to see more cities in space than just 3. So I'm hoping that they kind of would balance out these trailers by saying, actually, we have over 100 cities that are really small, or we have a procedurally generated small cities. What a city means in Starfield may not mean as much anyways, because it may very much just be a marketplace where you can buy and sell goods on a floating space platform or on a planet, and the vast majority of smaller encounters may just be entering a spaceship and fighting people on that spaceship to take over their spaceship or blow it up or whatever. Yeah, which it's kind of interesting. I don't know if you can board enemy spaceships, shoot them, and blow up their ships, or if the encounters are going to just be space-based combat, or if all encounters are going to actually happen on the planets. Moving on, because really it's all still speculation. Sony revealed its August 1st PlayStation Plus game catalog, which still Video Games Chronicle is doing a very bad job of listing in a way that where I can quickly scroll down and find what games they're talking about. Sea of Stars is the only one that jumps out. Watch the highlights of Spider-Man 2 San Diego Comic-Con panel on Video Games Chronicle if you want to. Notably, I think San Diego Comic-Con is over now, and because of the strike, this is basically the only thing I've heard about being talked about during San Diego Comic-Con is a Spider-Man 2 video game panel. Sledgehammer Games is seemingly teasing a Modern Warfare 3 reveal with a updated image logo to match the leaked promotional material. And then let's see, we are done then. So then we're going through the Gamatsu articles. Let's try to burn through these. Some of this we had talked about. Rise of the Triad Ludicrous Edition for consoles delayed to an unannounced date. PlayStation's China Hero Project Phase 3 press conference is set for July 26. Oceanhorn 2 Knights of the Lost Realm for the PS5, Xbox Series, and PC launches August 2. Let's see, this launched on Apple Arcade in September of 2019 and Nintendo eShop in October of 2020. I guess the question definitely to ask here is there an Oceanhorn 1 on Steam? Let's see if we can find that. Yes, there is an Oceanhorn 1, and it is on my wish list, which means there's really nothing more I need to do with it other than the general play more games and actually remove games from the wishlist. Blue Protocol Fight for the Future trailer is available on Gematsu if you want to check that out. I'm still looking for games, and Blue Protocol may have been one of the ones mentioned as far as replacing mobile games, replacing Destiny Child once it ends in September. Yeah, there really aren't a lot of good suggestions. Nothing as far as if you're looking for lewd anime waifus in a collectathon game. Like, you can get somewhat close, but nothing that goes as extreme as Destiny Child was going, or nothing that's quite in that same style or that same style of gameplay. I would hate to potentially try and replace it with something with a drastically different art style. But also, I would say the gameplay is going to be a big factor too. If the gameplay is not easy and easy to automate, I really just don't have the time to play it. NIS, Nippon Ichi Software, or Each Software, depending on how you're going to pronounce it, has its summer 2023 greeting card teasing a new game announcement. It says coming soon. What could you possibly take from this, though? It really doesn't seem like anything that I recognize at all. So leave it at that, I guess. New game announcements are like Disgaea 7, Disgaea 6, Destiny Connect, Closed Nightmare, The Witch and the Haunted Night 2, Labyrinth of Refrain, and Disgaea 5. These were all games that were announced in the past during the summer, which I guess gives you some hint, perhaps, but I'd have to assume it's not a Disgaea game from the looks of it, which would then just be potentially Destiny Connect 2 or Closed Nightmares 2, or The Witch and the Haunted Night 3, which I don't know any of those games and don't care to really click on it. Instead of speculating, it's probably easier just to wait until a proper announcement happens instead of wait for the tease. Sea of Stars is coming to the PlayStation Plus game catalog on day one, and the PS5 and PS4 demo is now available. And target equals blank. They've typed in the wrong HTML code here. This game, Sea of Stars, looks fairly well polished for kind of an 8-bit. I would really call this more of a 16-bit RPG game, not an 8-bit RPG maker style game. So we'll make a YouTube short on that. Armored Core Fires of the Rubicon gameplay video we already had looked at. Starfield, the Settlement Systems, an animated anthology. They're calling it an anthology instead of a trilogy, so there could be more. Although I feel like it is probably a bit of a waste to have third-party people animating in a completely different style a trailer teaser for the game. If you really love this story or this animation style, that's just not what you're getting when you buy Starfield, so it's going to come off very much like false advertisement. And if anything, I generally just don't agree with the idea of hiring third-party animators to try and promote your product that's just not going to look like that. Even in anime where you have different animators making the intros and the outros, the credit sequences and the intro sequences, that always feels very weird and a little bit off character model when it happens. it feels like you're potentially spending a little too much on your budget for the credits and the intros in anime instead of just spending more of your budget for the actual episodes. Moving on, DreamWorks All-Star Kart Racing has been announced for all consoles and PC, which don't have a link to a Steam page yet, apparently. Let's see. I actually would like some more information here, so I may spend a little bit more time. Now, part of the problem I would say here is you are going through a collection of DreamWorks characters that kids probably don't care about these days. Which, that could be a major problem. But there really isn't any group of characters outside of Mario that people would actually care about. Like Shrek, Poe, Tigress, Boss Baby, Puss in Boots, Hiccup, I don't even know who that is, Astrid, don't know that. 20 carts, several different locations, Secret Pass. Nothing here talking about microtransactions or monetizations, and a fairly low price. Deluxe Edition gives you the full base game and 2 exclusive characters in their carts, Master Ogway and Wolf. But yeah, if there's no microtransactions here, that might be fine. Of course, it might also be a big problem if there was no multiplayer here. So, yeah, there's a lot of things here to wonder. Remember also, I have put my tinfoil hat conspiracy thought into Major Nelson, Larry Herb, being in charge of DreamWorks or some department of DreamWorks once he leaves Microsoft and Xbox, being in charge of Xbox. And that is because he changed his background image to have a moon on Twitter. And so I am definitely going out on a very far limb to guess that he might be in charge of DreamWorks games or DreamWorks in general because of that. Which really wouldn't have too much of a connection to this because I imagine this will come out before that announcement happens, if it were to happen. Yeah, I definitely wish there were more interesting characters to have in a Mario Kart ripoff game. But even the Disney game has that problem where even the Disney characters aren't that interesting. Meanwhile, DreamWorks Trolls Remix Rescue has been announced for all consoles and PCs. This also from Game Mill Entertainment, so Game Mill seems to be the people in charge of making these games. I can see a Trolls game working much better than a Smurfs game at this point. But even at that, they're so late to the party as far as Trolls games compared to the Trolls movies that it is going to be a bit of nostalgia even for young kids if they want to play a Trolls game. And honestly, I think more than ever, kids these days just don't want licensed kid games. They want either original IP Mario games, or they want to just play Fortnite or Minecraft or Roblox. Original games that have been popularized for a long time, or they're on to the new thing, like that, what was that, Bit Summit shooter game? Quantum Error has canceled its PS4 version and added a PC version. Which, okay. The weird part about this, though, is I don't know if I've ever even heard of Quantum Error before. Team Kill Media. It's also a company I don't really recognize. Persona 5 Tacticia has a trailer for Toshihiro Kasukabe, if you want to watch that. NIS is announcing a falling block puzzle game called Yumero Yorem for PS4 and Switch. I guess they don't have any pictures. Even though it's due out October 26th in Japan, it's probably a very small game at that point. Famitsu's review scores for issue 1808 are available, including only 2 games, which usually they review 3 at least. Alice in the Country of Spades, Wonderful Black World for Switch, a game I've never even heard of. It sounds like it's Alice in Wonderland related. Was given 31 out of 40. Whereas Natsumon 20th Century Summer Vacation for the Switch was given 33 out of 40, and that's what this is. So, kind of an average score there, nothing amazing. And I doubt Natsumon is coming to the West, and this other game hasn't even been talked about by Gematsu. There's no link to it. That's how low they were in reviews, I guess. They're scraping the bottom of the barrel. Let's see. We already talked about Capcom acquiring Sword Cane Studios, although remarkably, every single person that's talked about this has had a different logo and screenshot to use to depict Sword Cane Studios, which maybe means they have too many logos. Grand Blue Fantasy vs. Rising creative director addresses a simple input system changes, which can we boil this down to something shorter than 5 paragraphs? Apparently not. Maybe we'll read this part. Looking beyond skill inputs, we want to bring fun of fighting games like reading your opponent and navigating movement to moment-to-moment strategy to players far and wide. We expect this will only bolster the fighting game community, so we're going to do everything in our power to bring you the best version of Grand Blue Fantasy vs. Rising as possibly can. So, the bolded part here, I guess we could skip to that. Grand Blue Fantasy was the perfect game to dare such game design. We wanted to diminish the hurdle as much as possible. We've made it possible to disable technical inputs in the settings. So they've made it so you could be a worse player and still somehow succeed. Inherently, fighting games always do push against the skill wall more than pretty much any other kind of game. And the experience that I would want if I was going to get into fighting games would be to have an easy mode that I could play in single player mode and go through a story section and perhaps get good enough that I could at least hold my own when playing online. But the vast majority of people at EVO and fighting game aficionados want the most technical, the most difficult inputs that are feasible to have, so that it is a true test of skill against players, and it isn't just a bunch of people mashing buttons and doing cheap unblockable combo attacks, which is exactly what I would be doing when I first started playing a fighting game, would be to mash buttons. And perhaps in single player mode, fighting games need to be really, really good about training people that they can't mash buttons and that they can't just do cheap unblockable attacks, because there is some kind of stamina system, or there are no unblockable attacks, and there's this constant evolution certainly in fighting games to try to make them a real sport, where it's really easy to make running 100 meters a real sport just by keeping everything fairly simple and fair. Video games much more complicated than running 100 meters though. Overpass 2 release date has been moved to September 22nd, and a new trailer showcases UTVs. This is apparently on Steam, but they didn't put a link on it. It seems like Gematsu might be getting worse about making Steam links, or maybe Steam is just not making the links as fast as they used to. Simon the Sorcerer Origins has been delayed to 2024, which is surprising because I would have been excited around an announcement of Simon the Sorcerer Origins, and I've never heard of it. It's supposed to be a point-and-click prequel to Simon the Sorcerer, which notably you are going to still run into problems if you did see, it's not even on the fall list. I've never seen this. I would have remembered this. If you do play this game, then you have a very modern point-and-click adventure game, and then the other Simon the Sorcerer games are going to be text-based and way more difficult, and you're going to need a walkthrough basically to beat them. So what you would need after Simon the Sorcerer Origins, if it could succeed well enough to justify having remakes and reboots of the series, you're going to need modern Simon the Sorcerer games like this and telling the events of the previous Simon the Sorcerer games, which would be fine because the visuals here are going to be way better than what the original Simon the Sorcerer games are. And then there's this also Willie Morgan and the Curse of Bone Town point-and-click adventure game that was being recommended from 2020. So seems like this might be the same developer or publisher. So they maybe the same publisher. Well, I will say it is fairly exciting to hear that Simon the Sorcerer Origins is being made in the first place. It's disappointing that it's been pushed back, although inherently things being pushed back aren't even really that big of a problem because it just means the game isn't going to be released in a bad state, or it has less of a chance, one hopes, to be released in a bad state, in an unfinished state. Which notably, while we have had some terrible games come out this year, I don't know if I can think of one that came out in an unfinished state that got any more finished. That like Forspoken game probably was in an unfinished state, but it wasn't given any more polish to it. And honestly, I would have struggled to think of even the list of games that have been released this year so far. Is the Terminator Resistance coming to Xbox Series. I don't know if this is PC. If it has a PC version. From the looks of it, it seems like it doesn't. Well, I kind of thought that there was a PC version. I'm gonna research this later and see if I can find something. A game called The Cosmic Wheels Sisterhood launches August 16th. It's a narrative adventure game priced at $17.99. Interesting. Looks like it's a bit of an interactive fiction adventure game. Really wouldn't call it a visual novel, but it does seem like it is probably a lot of talking to people. Visually, it does definitely stand out, so I'll put it on the follow list and make a YouTube short on it. Let's just drag some things around. A romance visual novel, RE:D, Cherish, is coming to the PS4 and Switch in November 22nd in Japan. It's currently available for PC. Yep, standard Japanese only release potentially. Yeah, it says it's on PC, but it's not saying where. Available on PC, so I'd assume that's not Steam. And I guess there is a point here where we potentially should just pre-evaluate visual novels or romance visual novels to see if this was translated to English, would it be released on Steam? This cat girl potentially might be a problem. We are also seeing some of the PlayStation 4 censorship noticeably here. You have a much taller version of the image with red cherish showing the underwear of this anime girl a lot more, and there's perhaps even more leg being shown here, leg and thigh, compared to this version, which puts the logo right over that to hide it all and stretches and skews everything to hide it. Crops off the bottom of the gun and all of this bottom part here. Then there is absolutely no difference on the inside flipped out image as far as I can tell, because PlayStation doesn't care about that. They only care about what it looks like on the shelves. And seemingly they care about where it looks like, what it looks like on the shelves in Japan also, which is kind of interesting because this would be a Japanese only cover. Most Japanese people would probably not care if there was a one-to-one parody of the cover art in Japan, and then in the United States or outside of Japan you have a completely different, way more censored image. But it is also kind of just pathetic censorship too, in that you're really not accomplishing much. You're putting a thin logo over thigh and underwear. Let's see. We already talked about the Xbox Series and Xbox One new home experience update rolling out. PlayStation Plus monthly games lineup for August announced. Now we'll get a much better list from Gamatsu. Death Store, Dreams, and PGA 2K23 available between August 1st and September 4th. Way easier to read than trying to figure it out through Video Games Chronicle. Fashion Dreamer launches November 3rd in the West, one day after the Japanese release. Is this a mobile game? No, it's a Switch game. Now I'd say this is getting more into the 80s anime style, which I've shifted my description of anime styles back a few years. And I would say, yes, this is probably 80, 85, 86 type style. Although this feels very soft and CGI, and I don't even know what style you would call that. So this looks like this is a dress-up fashion game, probably targeted to girls. And honestly, I don't think it looks amazingly well. Like, this thumbnail makes you think you're getting a flat 2D character and you clothing to match, and then you actually get in the game and these are what I would assume feel like lower effort 3D characters with very generic 3D outfits, potentially a lot of it just being asset flipped. I'm not seeing anything in these screenshots that would really appeal to me if I was into a fashion designing game. Yeah. Let's see if the trailer could perhaps convince me more. Now you have characters walking around, which you need some kind of mini game to justify why you're walking around. Are you talking to other people? Are you seeing other people in other outfits and potentially gaining those outfits by doing favors for the people or buying them? What is the actual minigame element here? Are you dressing up and doing fashion shows and getting points from the fashion shows? Seems to be you can do quite a bit to change the appearance of these characters, but you really can't make them look any better as far as the soft 3D CGI element. A lot of different body types, so you can have characters that look fairly young, or you can have characters that look fairly old, and probably going to interact with them. It does seem like maybe there's a friend system where you talk to people and make friends with them, and that's how you get currency to get more clothing. Which, yeah, that makes sense. That's basically what I'd do if I was left alone to be a fashion designer, is that to make a fashion dress-up game, is that you would have to have some kind of RPG element where you're wandering around getting some kind of currency to get more outfits to dress up more. I also have to heavily question, do girls in general like to dress up that much on a day-to-day basis, or guys? Like, yes, there are cosplayers, yes, there are people that like attention, yes, I've seen some people, but they are in the extreme minority that like to dress up every single day and be in a high level of fashion like this. But I would say for every one person I've seen probably 10,000 people who just want a plain old t-shirt and jeans type outfit, or that they have a school uniform, or they have a business office uniform. Maybe in Japan, I guess maybe you'd go out and dress up more, or if you're going on dates and things like that. But yeah, to be that big into fashion is the rarity. Of course, I don't know what else you would do with a fashion game other than always dressing up and doing fashion competitions, because it would be kind of silly if it was a beat 'em up game like Akiba Strip, where you're beating up people and stealing the clothes off their backs of the energy vampire characters. That would be too silly. Or beating up monsters and then taking the hides off of monsters to sew in your clothing, which is actually what you do in Shadow of the Tomb Raider. Is that you're killing animals, hunting animals, getting their hides, and then crafting outfits. It's ridiculous how much fashion is in Shadow of the Tomb Raider. You're changing outfits for no good reason. It would make more sense if there was more fashion by default in all games, but even seeing it in Shadow of Tomb Raider, it feels like just a waste of resources to have it even exist. Moving on, Project L introduces duo play system playable at EVO 2023. Go hands-on with League of Legends fighting game. So I guess that's what Project L is a League of Legends fighting game with what seems like 2 versus 2 fighting, which is an interesting idea. And then I see a bunch of characters here without actually hitting play on this that I don't recognize, which is no big surprise since I don't really know anything about League of Legends. A game called Delta Zeal is coming to the Switch on August 3rd. It's been on Steam since 2015 and not really relevant by much, at 72% positive with 54 reviews. This is a shoot 'em up game that may be an old game or it might be a brand new game. Either way, it certainly hasn't enthralled that many people. I never really found these shoot 'em up games that interesting, even back when they originally came out in arcades. Just not much of anything. And you're seeing a lot of these games are just now finding another eShop to be listed on to try and get some more sales. Crossfire Sierra Squad launches August 29th, priced at $29.99. It's for the PC, PSVR2, and PS5. So, on Steam, do you need VR? Yes. Does this look like this might be something worth actually making a YouTube short on? Yes. So I'm going to put it on the follow list and make a short on it, just in case, just to see if people actually buy and play this Crossfire Sierra Squad. Yep. And I guess we can see how Steam's new rule of only 2 videos at front and then some screenshots and then the remaining videos at the end. Although I'm not sure if there is a way where you could have some screenshots, some videos, then some screenshots again. I don't think they would let you do that. But yeah, it is somewhat beneficial. Although a screenshot like this that is just coming soon is perhaps not great. But it is in line with stopping them from changing the thumbnail to say coming August 29th. And this should be our last Gematsu article for today. Life by You early access has been delayed to March 5th, 2024, no longer due September 12th. This feels maybe like a Sims game. I feel like I vaguely recall this being announced. That guy looks rough. Yeah, this is a very rough guy to be talking directly to screen. I assume it's a guy. But yeah, the hair, the face, the wrinkles, even the shirt. This is one of those cases where you need to pull that camera back. Yeah, even pulling it back just a little bit helps, but maybe get some distractions on the side. I wonder if this is a one-person programmer. But yeah, in a professional setting, at least get your hair less scraggly. Alright, so the game is delayed. As for what the actual game is, it is The Sims by a smaller developer and published by Paradox Interactive, and it's designed to be the most moddable open life simulation games. Even in the title, though, it expresses this desire that the player make the content instead of the developer making the content. Let's see, what else has Paradox Interactive made? City Skylines. Okay, so it does have that pedigree behind it potentially as far as sim games that have been published. So yeah, there is potentially some reason to be hyped by Life by You. Although inherently Sims games in general are a problem. Like they never really make a lot of sense to me. Seems like you can use graphs here to have different levels of dialogue and interactions like that, but I'm not sure that's anything more than interactions and talking. I don't know if it's actual movement or other things that could be moddable. And I don't know if this is a case where you're actually modding your characters to interact with other NPCs, or if you're making NPCs that the player character would interact with. But noticeably they are not doing the Simlish gibberish talk. There's real dialogue here popping up. Moving on to GameDeveloper.com articles. We'll probably burn through these fairly quickly. Let's see, we had already talked about the potential Immortals Phoenix Rising sequel being canceled. The Ubisoft account purge. What game is this? Just Dance? Like, what game is this then? What game is even this? Or this? Man. There are Assassin's Creed Vikings, Watch Dogs, unsure what this is. Unsure what this is. Mario vs. Rabbids. Maybe this is the I don't know what the actual name of the sports game would be. I assume this is Just Dance. I don't know what this is. Yeah, for Ubisoft to have so many games in their background logo that I can't name on site is definitely a problem. Their games are just not iconic enough. We talked about hardware stumbling as the Game Pass delivering increase. At a certain point, though, this desire by shareholders for increase every quarter no matter what has got to stop. We've got to have some form of recession or pause, something. If you don't want to use the word recession or collapse, something has to happen as far as just the general acceptable accounting procedures changing so that companies don't constantly have to report success. And maybe it really should be something as simple as companies just not reporting to shareholders at all, which probably is illegal. Companies should really just be forced to go private. I think it would help them more than they realize if they were private and didn't have to report to shareholders on a quarterly basis. If it were you had to report every 6 months instead of every 3 months or once a year, I think a lot of companies could have a lot more breathing room just around those ideas too. Although at the moment it seems like companies are just increasingly starting to fudge the truth a little bit and just straight up lie to shareholders too, in way because of shareholder demand and ever increasing profit demand continuing to go up and up and up. Like 1% increase obviously is not good enough according to GameDeveloper.com. We already talked about CD Projekt Red laying off 100 workers after becoming overstaffed. It doesn't really seem to me like there's a way you can be overstaffed if you're running your company well, particularly by 100 people. I could see accidentally hiring 2 people and 2 people actually working out when you expected one of them to not work out and leave in the first 6 weeks. But to repeat that same mistake 50 more times is kind of ridiculous. And almost certainly I wouldn't be surprised if all of these 100 workers are just QA people that they were always planning on laying off. Did we get any real details here? No, I don't think we did. We talked about Capcom boasting consistently strong mid-2023 quarter. We talked about Sword Canes being acquired. We talked about Microsoft integrating Vimeo. I thought it was stupid for them to really bother, but having read this article, which is a great testament to actually reading articles instead of just reading headlines, it actually makes a lot more sense. If Xbox has not really had any other option to pay for things other than buying gift cards and PayPal. Really, Xbox needs other options, though. And then Quantum Error dev canceling the PS4 version we talked about. And so that should bring us to the Steam follow list cleanup now, with the auto blur enabled. Everything's just reloading because of the crash. So here we have a game called Hug Survivor, which seems like it is a very differently animated Vampire Survivors type clone game, although I'm not sure how the game actually plays. This came out in February of 2023, so I could probably say no to it now, just as not being very relevant. Yeah, I don't see myself really playing this game. If anything, this feels like this is more of a joke game and feels a little too expensive. Maybe it's a cheap Chinese game, maybe it's a cheap Japanese game. One of the characters just lost their clothing out of the blue. Which that's Not really something I was expecting to have happen. So yeah, we can say no to Hug Survivor. Let's see, we have a game called Hubris with patch 2.0. This is a VR action adventure game set in a unique, colorful sci-fi world. With when did patch 2.0 come out? I don't know. It kind of doesn't matter. It does look like a good VR game that's actually been well reviewed though. So I have to leave this on the full list until I just decide I'm going to get rid of all VR games, which I'm not ready to do that. Halloween Hero. Let's see. Trick or Treat, about a mischievous pup trying to score candy. See how this actually plays. It looks a lot like Costume Quest in a 3D environment compared to Costume Quest, which is in a more top-down 2D environment. Yeah, it is basically just Costume Quest being ripped off, which, in all fairness, trick-or-treating as a gameplay mechanic is not the worst idea ever. And you have custom costumes here, which Costume Quest did not have that. Or Costume Quest had maybe a few costumes you could switch between. Very positive reviews, over 30. This is, I guess, the line where you would say a game is niche, doesn't have a very big following, but it is actually good enough to actually deserve being on the wish list. So I'll put it on the wish list. That doesn't inherently mean I'll ever get around to playing it or buying it. Next we have what looks like a point-and-click narrative adventure called How We Know We're Alive. Let's just make sure it's not early access, and then let's just add it to the library here. Let's try that again. Okay. I guess I can't add it to the library at the moment, so we'll just add it to the wish list. I probably need to go through the wish list and find games that are just free and add them to the library in general. Anything free should probably just be in the pile of games I already own. It's not gonna ruin my collection in any way to have a few more games. But yeah, every time I click here, it says there's a problem. Particularly when you're talking more point-and-click games. It does create a interesting question as to whether it's worth your time to review a game that's already free. And that's something I guess the YouTube Shorts could also help with, is that I can highlight free games and then not really need to bother playing them. So this is a physics game where you're trying to bathe the cat and get all the green stink particles away. Well, that doesn't look terrible as an idea, so we'll put that on the wish list. Here we have a game called Hover Riders from 2022, which is just not relevant enough, so that can leave. Let's see, next we have a horror game from February of this year called House of the Soul, which has only 5 reviews. I'll give it, I guess, a little bit more time, but next time I see it I almost certainly will say no to it. Then we have House of the Ghost from 2022, which we can remove that. Just looks like a horror asset flip type game, or just a generic bad horror game. Well, see if the page will load a little bit better. We have a game called House Builder that a lot of the screenshots don't want to load on. Now, I was playing a app/game on my phone for a brief couple of weeks, maybe a month or two, of just like designing my dream house. I didn't really go that far into it, honestly. I got a good enough outline that I could certainly hand to a real architect and tell them, build this if I guess won the lottery and could afford to build a house from scratch. Particularly, this was like a dream house that was way too big and targeting somewhere around like $5 million house, something like that. This looks interesting enough as a game, but I would probably not spend too much time on a game like this either. The actual grinding elements of building a house, I think, might get very boring fairly quickly. And the only people that I've seen have played games like House Flipper have had to, on YouTube, do significant amounts of the gameplay off screen. Just edit it down to a walkthrough of your final product after spending hours and hours playing the game. So you really have to enjoy the idea of building a house in general. And the way you're building a house here is probably not too different from the way you would just remodel a game in House Flipper. Or potentially this is actually way more work for less reward than House Flipper. But whatever. It meets the requirements by far. So it can go to the wish list. Then Hotel Transylvania, Scary Tale Adventures. At this point, I think Hotel Transylvania spin-off games are not relevant enough. I did like the first Hotel Transylvania game, and I mean, not game, movie. But I don't think there was a growing audience after the second movie or third movie. I don't think it just kept going up and up and up in quality. It's a Little Red Robin Hood character, must have been from one of the later movies. There's only 2 reviews in this. Then seems like all the reviews are fairly high, but this one has been refunded, even though it has a thumbs up. Yep. In general, you would think that the relevancy element of having to have 30 reviews would only affect small independent games, where this is a movie license game that is big enough that it should have gotten more reviews. Arguably, this might also be a game that plays and sells very well on the Nintendo Switch and does not sell at all in PC. But yeah, and that's something we'd like to see improved too, is that it would, with the Steam Deck in particular, we'd start to see more kids games being played on PC instead of on the Switch exclusively, or even on Xboxes and PlayStations. Looks like it's basically a 3D platformer with some beat 'em up elements, which is a very basic concept that you kind of want to try to avoid for a kids game. But yeah, the main problem here is Hotel Transylvania. Sorry. Hopefully this hasn't been blurred the whole time, but it probably has. The main problem here is you don't want, there's just no relevancy around Hotel Transylvania. So I'm going to take that off the fall list. And then our last fall list cleanup for today is Hotel R&R, which is it in early access? Nope, but it is VR dependent. It's a Rockstar simulator, which means you just destroy everything around your hotel and you're just destroying your hotel in VR, which is not the worst idea for games, to have basically asset flipped content and descriptions of things and then let the player just destroy it, just to get your jollies off or work on frustration. The destruction games. Blast Corps was a kind of destruction game for the Nintendo 64 where you were destroying usually bridges and bigger things. There's a lot of variety of weapons and things to break. Yep, so I'll leave that on the fall list again until I decide I'm no longer willing to have the fall list full of VR games. And so that's going to bring us 3 hours into the stream to all the new games on Steam. So let's go through those. Let's see. Full Moon Rush. Looks a little 8-bitty, but I'm going to give it a chance. Crimson Tactics, The Rise of the White Banner is one of these strategic RPG games. Not really my style, but I'm going to put it on the fall list even at that, and I'm definitely going to give it a short. Then we have something called Conscience, which weird animation style visual novel game. Let's see. Alright, I guess I'm just going to be very generous today and give that a chance too. Then we have our first adult game called The Traveler, which I have to applaud simplistic names that aren't explicit. It's a 3D CGI game. Looks like there's some animation and movement to it. Now, one of the things I was questioning here is that the screenshots on some of the adult games in the last stream are oddly not explicit. And once again, we kind of have that issue where the first few screenshots here, this is actually a very nice 3D model of that lady. Nothing explicit to start here at the beginning of it, but then you eventually get to screenshots that are explicit. So perhaps there's some push-pull happening where they are trying to put the adult screenshots at the end on the backside of non-adult screenshots. Overall though, it seems to me like this is probably still just a visual novel. One thing in the video, I can see the characters' faces are not moving or interacting, so you have like a lady walking down the street and she has a walking animation, but the face is just in this completely neutral style, like, which just doesn't look human at all. You'd have a bit of a smirk, or you would smile, or you would open your lips a little bit and breathe in, breathe out, things like that. The Traveler is $7.99 in English only. If you're into 3D visual novel adult games, I think this looks as good as any of the others. I'd say also if you're more into a fetish of adult intercourse in the car, you might have some fetish satisfaction for that game too. Moving on, we have Supreme Ruler 2030, which is already mixed, so we can say no to that. We have a game called Escape the Office, which looks like a asset flip dark screenshot horror game. We have a game called Tower of Chaos, which is already on the follow list. So I guess if something's already on the follow list at this point, I'm not going to make another YouTube short on it. I think that's really just how that has to go. I am very concerned about potentially making 2 or 3 YouTube shorts on the same games. Here we have an English, Russian, Spanish language game called Dairy Some Answers Before I, or Deary Some Answers Before I. Looks like it's a horror visual novel. My first knee-jerk instinct would be to say no, that this is going to be some kind of garbage Russian game. But I want to be generous. I don't want to just be anti-Russian language games or anti-Russian games. So I guess I'll say yes to this. And I am really just taking the risks on as far as YouTube Shorts too, in trying to make a YouTube short for basically any game, regardless if it might be a little lewd or it might have adult horror elements. So best case scenario, I just make sure the first minute of the video plays well and doesn't have something pop up. I've still never had a YouTube short like demonetized or flagged in any way, and YouTube shorts I still think are getting enough views that I imagine the algorithm might be looking at it, but I wouldn't be surprised if YouTube has a very different algorithm looking at YouTube shorts or not looking at YouTube shorts at all, and they just say, well, whatever, we're not going to actually monitor this content since it's only a minute long. This Last Breath game doesn't look like anything of interest. Here we have another one of these. If anything, this feels like this is becoming a genre in itself, which it has been fairly long since we've seen low effort game developers just all follow one bandwagon and make genres. This looks to me like it is stuttering even in its own footage, very possibly because there are multiple players playing. But yeah, you have just asset flip garbage that you're platforming on to get higher and higher. Only Climb itself as a game is almost certainly a ripoff of this game, Only Up. And this came out in May. Yeah, I would assume that this is the original game, because the more like this is not pushing to anything else. So yeah, you have an element here of name confusion and calling it Only Climb instead of Only Up, and then having the multiplayer element as an issue, and you can see it's already mixed reviewed, so that's going to be no for that game. It is questionable how far low effort game developers can follow the bandwagon of Only Climb or Only Up, because it really is just the same gimmick as it's just going to be the same gimmick over and over again, and it really is just a 3D version of getting over it, or perhaps a little influence of Jump King, but I would say Jump King plays a lot differently than what these games look like they play. This game, Lethal Crisis Protosphere, apparently doesn't support English anyways, but I was going to dismiss it anyways. Unless this was some kind of old game, which it might be. It's still not relevant. Forklift Simulator 2023. Now, arguably, there should probably be real forklift simulator apps out there to teach people how to drive forklifts, but I don't know if that really is what this game is about. It looks kind of boring, so I'm not going to make a YouTube short on it, but I will follow it just to see if I get surprised by it. In reality, any game that's simulating part of doing a job is going to be fairly boring. A herding game, I feel like there had already been a herding game. 14 levels, early access, $1.69 for too many sheep. Well, I suppose this is one of those games that right now is probably okay to highlight, but if we started to see a lot of these, if there was a Too Many Sheep 2 that came out next month, or if there was a 2 or 3 other companies trying to make herding simulation games, I would start to say no, but since it's a novelty at the moment, I'll give it a short and put it on the follow list. Let's see, Basalt Breaker. It's an isometric, looks almost like a Minesweeper game with more work, which making Minesweeper slower doesn't really help much. Yes, this definitely just seems like it's Minesweeper. So, Minesweeper, but you have to break it manually to see if there's a mine there. For $5, I'm going to say no to that. Circle, triangle, square. Looks like it's a minimalistic shape game. And just don't feel like there's enough here to make me think it's really worth playing, so I'm going to say no to that. Let's Fight Box. Looks like a kind of simplistic top-down asteroids style game. Far too simplistic for its own good, so I'm going to say no to that. Then we have Zhuanyun Mist Beyond the Mountains, which is mixed and already on my fall list. Which is kind of a shame because what in the world is going on now? I don't know what just happened there. Like, the chat is all white. Yeah. Seems like the chat crashed and the tab crashed. I think I really am going to have to just do a RAM test. Just full on memory test. And see if that passes. Well, anyways, back to Zhuanyun Sword, Mist Beyond Mountains. We can take that off. It's poorly received. And honestly, I guess I really don't care. It is just an RPG game. Yeah, notice everything here is just taking a long time to load. 9 nights. Looks like it might be something. Does it support English? Yes, English and Chinese. Give it a chance. Then we have an adult game called Milk Me, Darling Tits Fairy. Which, yeah, what can we say about this? Seems like maybe you've got two different girls, all big boobs. Seems like you're mostly just having intercourse with them and putting them in a leg spread position and cheap, bizarre outfits. It's not particularly good costume play by anything. It's just like lingerie, and even at that, kind of bad lingerie. It says in the description, all characters are 18 plus and no characters get hurt in the game, which I could see some people definitely being happy to hear that. Like, there is a fairly high prominence of bondage and masochism and sadism, where the fictional characters are fictionally being hurt, and I could see some people being turned off by that. Overall, though, the game is $2.24. I have to remind myself to say the price. It's English only, and it does seem to me like it is mostly just a simulator game. Seems like you're manipulating these 3D CGI ladies in different ways to raise up stats. The backgrounds look poor, the animations look repetitive, the other items in the room look poorly animated. So yeah, definitely not quality enough to bother to even put on the fault list. Here we have a game called Bullock Mayan Warfare, which is probably nothing, but I'll give it a chance. Just gonna be really generous today. Here we have a game called Cyber Assault. The weirdness at this point is it might very well be, if there was something wrong with my computer, might be time to prematurely buy a new computer than it would be to try and fix it. Just buy an all new motherboard, get an Intel motherboard instead of an AMD motherboard, just because of a hopeful lack of bugs on Intel processors and CPUs, and buy a whole new video card. Can I afford any of that? Not really. But I've already had a major problem fairly early in this motherboard, in this computer, and the computer is probably at least 3 years old, if not 4 or 5. So it wouldn't be the craziest of thoughts. We're looking at a game called Portal Dungeon, side-scrolling roguelite. I'll give it a chance. But before I do anything, I should actually try and test the RAM and just make sure it's not something fairly simplistic that could be fixed. Murder at the House doesn't look like anything of interest. Dreaming Chicken looks like it is the idea of climbing up, or only up, but this time with soft CG, soft 3D, low polygon objects, and you're playing as a chicken. Now noticeably, a chicken has more of a way in which it probably could float downward if you start to fall to save you. So there might be a real benefit, if you wanted to play one of these games, to play the game as a chicken, so that it could save itself and float downward and not lose all progress. That being said, I'm still not really sold on these types of games in the first place. I'm not even really sold on playing Getting Over It with Benet Foddy, which has much more narrative elements to justify its existence. Next we have Sex Simulator Yoga Class, which is 3D CGI characters. Again, just simulating in a yoga room encounters. What's funny about this, I guess, is if you have a fetish of potentially doing yoga positions, there might be some of that, but there are only really a few yoga positions that aren't also just Kama Sutra positions. And definitely there are some positions in the Kama Sutra and other books like Joy of Sex and such that are not realistic positions and potentially even dangerous positions. But for what this game is really showing, yeah, there's really not a lot here. It's $2.39, it's English only. Again, seems to me like there's really only 2 characters, which is fairly lackluster for adult games. Next we have Outworld Patrol, which I don't think has quite enough polish for me to say yes to it. I kind of like this idea of being a dune buggy in space and having infrared, but you can see even in this trailer it's going to be very repetitive and just like an infinite runner, where you're just jumping and shooting over and over again. So yeah, I'm going to say no to this. Why is this on the follow list in the first place? Did I click it by accident, or was it already on the follow list? The Happy Dismal Town is the next game. Yeah. That doesn't look like anything. Let's see. We have the Super Intern story. I don't see enough of polish on this either, so I'm gonna say no to this. Like, you're playing as a monster and you're trying to create traps for the player hero character, it looks like. Alright, and so now we're at our, I believe, 4th adult game today, this Wednesday, so we're getting quite a lot of that. But it is yet another 3D CGI game called Casino of Desire. Now, looking at this trailer, they're being fairly cinematic about panning over the 3D model of the lady and not just having her statically stand in one place and just looking at her face. I'm seeing actual lip movements. It seems to me like there's potentially a full casino story, maybe casino heist, happening around this, but I don't think you actually play any casino games. That would be my guess, is that you're not really playing any casino games. Well, no, weirdly, looks like there is a casino game or 2 in here that you would have to play. Seems like there's a fairly large variety of ladies. I wouldn't say they all look amazingly well done. And you basically know all the 3D models are just asset flipped and reused over and over again. Casino of Desire, though, is very cheap at $1.99. It says it has full Chinese audio support and then subtitles for English and Japanese. It does say that you have to be good at gambling to potentially finish your mission, which I assume means finishing the game. So I would heavily suspect that there's not really that much content in the game overall. And that is just kind of the problem with adult games in general, is that they often are just these small collections of adult scenes that may not even be unique to that one game. They may be getting reused or skinned in a different way so the characters look slightly different, but the actual animations and the hard work is being repeated. This game out of fuel. You're using a chainsaw to destroy objects. Yeah, I don't think there's enough of a game there to make me care about that. And then we have yet another adult game here. This time Double Beauty is the name of it, and it is both 2D anime girls with big boobs, and at least one of the characters comes off as a little bit more CGI. But I think in general it probably is more 2D. It is some kind of puzzle game where you're maybe matching pieces or finding pieces to reveal the images. Yeah, it's like a square jigsaw puzzle where you have to drag the squares to the right place, and there are two puzzles at the same time, so the pieces might go to the puzzle on the left or the right. It's $1.39. It says it supports 7 languages, none of them with audio. Seems like it's probably a fairly simplistic game and small game. I do kind of like the idea of these games being cheaper for these adult games, and we are seeing something that is more in an anime style, although the big boobs and the style that they're using here definitely makes all the characters seem to be very old. They're not going for the shorter, anatomically inaccurate kawaii or moe styles that are often misattributed to younger looking characters. And then the exact next game is called Flipjoy, which feels like it's probably from the same developer. This time it's just match 2 card images to reveal a 2D anime girl image in the back. Although, weirdly, in this case, I don't actually need to censor it because it's not in the adult section, which this is clearly a game that would be better suited if it was in the adult section. Also, it seems like there's only 4 pictures overall in the whole game. Yeah. And these images that are on the flip cards feel like they've probably been stolen or licensed from somebody else, because they're not really in the same art style as this. So yeah, I guess not too much to say there. I'm not going to put that on the fault list. I'll give it a YouTube short. Mystery Box The Journey feels like it is a ripoff of that other game. What was that game? The Room 1, Room 2, Room 3. That being said, The Room as a concept of having a mystery box can't really be exclusive, so a ripoff of that game makes some sense. So I'll give it a chance. Now, visually polished wise, this is a little rough. Apparently this is the 4th game in the mystery box series, so let's actually figure out if there's a way to play any of the other games on Steam. Well, it seems like the answer to that is no. So if this is the 4th chapter and the first 3 chapters were on cell phones, that loses my attention, so I'm going to take it off the follow list. It already pretty much lost my attention by the visuals. In comparison, if you look at the Room 2, there's a lot more polish to the visuals. I wouldn't even say the Room 2 visuals are particularly amazing. Here they're showing a comparison of what the cell phone version was, where it was just blackness, and the PC edition has more visuals to that. I guess I don't own Room 4. And I'm not even a super fan of like the Room series. I would potentially like to see more improvements in this genre. Let's see. Where were we? Okay, next game we have is called Active Defense. It's a tower defense game that doesn't seem like it actually would support English by much, so I'm going to say no to that. Then we have a side-scrolling shooter game called For Enigma, which I guess I could make a YouTube short on, but I'm not going to put it on the follow list. Here we have a game called Trippy's Disc Golf, which looks like it's an asset flip garbage game. How many more games do we have to talk about today? Yeah, about 10. Here we have a game called Star Fringe Adverse, which is already mixed, so I'm going to say no to that. And then we have Detective Solitaire Butler Story 3, which we don't get enough of these solitaire games these days to really not make a short around it. Yeah. Now noticeably, we still are not seeing like any kind of anime style adult games. So there definitely feels like there's been a bit of a silencing effect. That being said, this is perhaps a bit of an exception. This Tap Romantics game is being blurred in this screenshot for some reason, but nothing being blurred here in this bikini, and it seems like it's a match 3 tap game. And weirdly, it's not in the adult section. It's $1.39, several languages. It doesn't have any adult content warning at all, which, if anything, I suspect this is perhaps the other side of censorship, and the silencing effect of censorship is that you'll have a lot of companies say, well, we just won't put our lewd anime games on Steam and we won't release them, and then you'll just have other people that say, well, screw it, I'll just not check any of the checkboxes that say the character is lewd, and hope I get away with it, and put it regularly on the non-adult section of the storefront. Which, this is what this side of what can happen is what destroys and invalidates the idea of the adult section in the first place. Is if the adult section is in any way burdensome or unwelcoming to new content that should be in the adult section, people will just stop labeling their games, since it is self-reporting, as needing to be in the adult section. There are far more movies that have been released where they look like they should be in C-17 on the cover art or the name and title and description, but are actually rated R or PG-13 in their content, because being behind the curtain in a video rental store back when there was video rental stores was definitely the death knell for a movie. You get far more sales, far more rentals if you're not behind the curtain. Moving on, though, we have this game Star Quest, which I'd say is probably nothing, but I'm willing to potentially give it a chance. Again, perhaps being too generous today. Then we have a platforming game called Ava's Adventure, which I would say I just don't think the animation here is good enough on the thumbnail, on the characters. So I'm going to say no there. I do feel like I keep making the same arguments and saying the same thing over and over again, particularly around the adult content games. But I mean, what can I do? Particularly with like censored gaming barely making any content these days. I feel like I'm the only person even trying to mention these games exist. One-man army against the silencing effects of censorship or self-censorship. That being said, censored gaming did come out with a new YouTube video, I think today. We'll have to wait and see until his next video comes out. Like for a while there, he was capable and succeeding at putting out videos almost on a weekly basis, and then he's had all these horrible things either happen to him, or he's at least claimed all these horrible things have happened to him that have delayed him making new content when there was some stuff to definitely talk about. I think we can say no to blocks here. It does seem like there's really not a fully polished level design in particular around this. And that's not something I usually point out when saying no to a game, but it is definitely something I could point out more often. There are plenty of games like that. Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. Since this is such a big game, I will make a exception and make another YouTube short around it. We can see this is 82% positive right now, and it has had an all-time peak so far of today of 8,757, and yeah, it just came out today. Now, that does highlight another problem here, is that this Ratchet and Clank YouTube short, if I make it today, won't come out for months and months and months. And I don't know how to really address that, per se. Is that how many YouTube shorts is too many YouTube shorts to put out in a day? And how many days of potentially running out of YouTube shorts would be too long? What would be better, frankly, is if I could split the YouTube shorts into games that are coming soon and games that are out now. That would be the logical split. I don't know how to do that, though. I would have to think about it. But yeah, if all of a sudden there were out now videos getting put out as fast as possible, and then there was a longer backup B team of YouTube shorts of coming soon, and then that might work very well. This native hunter game, though, I think we can say no to it. Yeah, there is an idea certainly around playing as like a Native American type person, but they're really constructing more than what a Native American in the past really would have constructed. Yeah, I'm going to say no to this. Or at least they're constructing more than what I think a Native American would have constructed in the past. Astro Tester. think we can say no to that too. Yeah, let's just be generous. We have 4 more games to go through and then we'll be done for today. Here we have a jumping on the bandwagon concept of only down, which inherently you would expect that only up, in contrast, would also let you go back down at the end of the game. This significantly changes what the goal of the game is, going downward, and how far you can fall before you die and get reset. This really is just a dropper map, like in Minecraft, than it is a platformer, where you have to have strong platforming elements. It really seems like this character just does not die at all. So you can probably just fall all the way down and then bounce. Maybe the first time you touch something you get reset at that point, or that's your new checkpoint. A lot of this could very easily just be procedurally generated. You could make a spiral type staircase and then spawn a 3D object on that spiral procedurally and then have a finalized product. The other problem certainly with falling downward is it seems like if you just went to the edge and jumped off the edge, you would just constantly fall downward no matter what until you're hitting water or something. If you ever do hit water. There was a mobile phone game around this dropper concept where you would hurt your character, and so they would like break arms and legs as they jumped down if they collided with anything, and so you were trying to fall as far as you can before dying and just keep on going downward. It was a little bloody, gory joke game. But I played it for a while and then eventually just got bored of it because there's not too much you can do doing dropper maps or anything. The beauty of a Minecraft dropper map is that it's going to be a set number of dropper puzzles, and then once you finish it, you're going to be done with it. Whereas this potentially goes on forever, or just goes on too long. That probably may very well not go on forever. There again, I'm seeing when the page loads a lot of white at the bottom of the screen, which seems weird. We have a game here called Vampire Hunters, which, just for the ridiculous amount of guns on screen, I'm gonna make a YouTube short on this, but in reality, almost certainly not playable to have this much on the screen, taking up your heads-up display and space. Here we have a game called Revive and Prosper Prologue, which, yeah, that doesn't look like anything. And our final game for today is Samurai Kento, which I'll say yes to and give a short. It's probably not anything, but we'll give it a chance. And so that will be the end of the show. Well, we've got some weirdness happening here, and then when I moused over my mouse to the chat, I see that somebody said gee hee hee fire on the chat. I don't know when that happened, but sorry I missed your chat. I'm having technical problems with at least Firefox today. That's going to be it for this stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want to support me further, there's some links down below in the description box.